Chapter 49, A Conversation between Rias and Sana. Chapter 49, A Conversation between Rias and Sana. Inside the student council room at Kuoh Academy, Sana Shidori glanced at the group that had arrived unusually early. Her eyes landed on a blonde girl standing awkwardly behind Rias, a face she didn't recognize. "Rias, is she a new member of your peerage?" "Something like that," Rias replied nonchalantly. "But she hasn't formally accepted my offer yet." "Hasn't accepted?" Sana raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you got rejected again." Her gaze flicked briefly to Asia, the shy blonde girl, but her thoughts wandered somewhere else entirely, to Shin Akira. That boy had already turned down recruitment offers from both her and Rias more than once. Especially Rias, whose track record of rejections had begun to outpace her own. Sana had already given up trying. Rias had since turned her attention to other sacred gear wielders. "Don't say again like I get rejected all the time," Rias shot back, clearly annoyed. "Sorry, it slipped out," Sana replied with a composed smile tugging at her lips. Rias let out a sigh and motioned to Asia. "This is Asia. A candidate for my peerage. I need you to process her enrollment. She'll be in the same class as Konako-chan." "Understood." Sana didn't press further. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and retrieved a student registration form. "Name, age, place of origin." "My name is Asia Argento. I'm 15 years old. From Northern Europe. I used to be a nun, but now that's enough, Asia." Rias quickly cut her off before she could reveal too much. It wasn't a dark secret, but there was no need to offer unnecessary details to others. "A former nun." Sana frowned slightly. "Rias, are you serious? She's already been excommunicated by the church. Her background won't be an issue anymore." "In that case, fine. Just make sure it doesn't come back to haunt us." "I'm aware." Sana filled out Asia's information quickly and slid the form into a folder. For them, this was all just formalities. Unlike normal students, those connected to the supernatural world didn't require official government documentation. "Tsubaki, please escort her to pick up her uniform and textbooks. After that, take her to Konako's class." "Yes, Kaiku." Tsubaki Shinra, who had been quietly standing by the wall, nodded in acknowledgement. "Follow me," she said to Asia. "Why yes." With a mix of nervousness and awe, Asia followed Tsubaki out of the room. They would head to the supply room to get her new student essentials. From there, she'd meet her homeroom teacher and be introduced to her class. It was a smooth, behind-the-scenes process, one of the perks of having powerful connections in elite circles. Once the two of them were gone, Sana turned back to Rias. "So, how's that other matter going?" "What other matter? Who else?" "Shin Akira. How's the recruitment going?" Sana set down her pen and looked at Rias seriously. She still remembered she was the first one who spotted Akira's potential. But after being turned down so many times, she eventually gave up. "I've already given up," Rias admitted quietly. "Someone like him, he'll never bow to anyone." "You? Giving up? Are you sure you're the real Rias? The one I know never quits so easily. You remember the rule, don't you? In the evil peace system, a king can only reincarnate someone weaker than themselves." Sana paused, her expression tensing. "Don't tell me, his power already surpassed yours." "It has," Rias answered plainly. "He broke through his limits right in front of me. There's no doubt anymore. 16 years old, and already at ultimate class? And he's still human? That's absurd." Sana sat back, visibly shaken. But if Rias had really given up, then it made sense. One of the fundamental laws of the evil peace system was that devils couldn't reincarnate beings significantly more powerful than themselves. If the power gap was too great, the ritual simply failed. A long time ago, one of the 5 great dragon kings Tannen had managed to become a devil via evil peace reincarnation. But such cases were exceptionally rare. Tannen only accepted devil reincarnation to protect his species dragons that could only survive on dragon apples from the underworld. That land became his territory after he swore loyalty to Mephistopheles, one of the legendary devils and a Queen Peace class powerhouse. That level of deal-making was only possible for someone like Mephisto, who had the strength to reincarnate a dragon king. Now, with Akira at ultimate class level, it was clear Rias could never recruit him. You said he broke through in front of you. Were you two fighting? No. He killed a fallen angel that had been stationed in Kuoh. The fight caught the attention of Azazel himself. Akira was severely injured in that battle, but after he recovered, his power skyrocketed. Wait, Azazel was in Kuoh. Rias didn't mention that she had once lost to Akira. Not out of pride, but because the memory still stung. Even at full strength, wielding the power of destruction, she had been defeated by a boy recovering from a serious injury. She wasn't ready to relieve that humiliation. Kuoh is becoming more and more chaotic. Sana rubbed her temples, overwhelmed by the wave of new information. The current rogue devil hunt in Kuoh had been entrusted entirely to Akira. And in such a short time, so many major events had occurred without her even realizing. If she knew that Akira had battled Vali, the White Dragon Emperor, just last night, she would have likely questioned her entire understanding of reality. Luckily, that battle had taken place in a remote location, and both fighters had taken care to avoid collateral damage. As a result, few even knew it had happened. So now that you've given up on recruiting him, what's your next move? I heard the third son of the Phoenix family just won another raiding game. His popularity is soaring. Humph. I'm never marrying him. That's not your choice. This is an engagement between 2 great houses. You don't have the right to refuse. You're wrong. Now, I do. Don't tell me. Yes. It's exactly what you're thinking. You really are something, Rias. Rather than marry some spoiled noble boy who only flaunts his family name, I'd rather choose a man of my own. Even if it's a mistake, at least it'll be mine. That's a gamble. It is. But life is a gamble, Sana. I'm not like you. Just don't regret it. Sana looked at Rias with a quiet intensity. As someone who had also defied fate and rejected an arranged marriage herself, she understood just how heavy such a decision could be. Chapter 50, The Devil's Job. Chapter 50. The Devil's Job. Time slowly drifted into dusk. Most of the students at Kuoh Academy had already gone home. But inside the Occult Research Club room, the lights were still on, casting a warm glow over the evening as the club carried on with its own kind of busy routine. Tonight, 2 additional guests were present in the room. Well then, let's begin today's work, Rias Gremory said calmly, addressing her peerage. Yes, Buku, Akenohime Jima replied with her usual soft smile. Understood, added Uato Kaiba with a light nod. Ready, responded Konako Tajao curtly, as always. Akira, standing off to the side, could only watch their interaction with a slightly puzzled expression. Even now, he still didn't fully understand the reason behind the so-called job they were doing. He couldn't help but wonder, why do devils need to do something like this? Flyers were distributed across town, promising to grant your wish. When night fell, the time belonging to devils, if someone truly desired something and performed the summoning ritual, a devil would actually appear before them. A contract would then be formed between the human and the devil. The devil would fulfill the human's desire, and in return, the human had to offer something of equal value. But unlike the old legends claiming devils would demand a person's soul, the devils in this world were far more pragmatic. As long as it held value, emotional, spiritual, or material, anything could count as payment. Even snacks, video games, or other strange trinkets could suffice. But why go through all this trouble? Rias, Akira finally spoke up, his tone thoughtful, there's something I've been meaning to ask you for a while. What is it? Rias turned to face him. Why do you have to do this work? Granting wishes and forming contracts with humans. Doesn't it kind of go against the image of devils? Besides, Rias, it's not like you're lacking money or anything. His honest question made the others pause. Even Akeno and Chiba turned to Rias, silently curious about her response. Rather than being offended, Rias smiled. What you want to know is why we devils form contracts with humans, right? Yeah, exactly. This job isn't about the material reward, Akira. What we seek is the contract itself. The contract? Rias nodded. For devils, a contract is a form of achievement. Each completed contract gives us spiritual feedback. You could call it the devil's version of divine merit. In the end, it makes us stronger. Stronger. Akira glanced around at Rias's peerage with a flat expression, as if to say, really? Rias narrowed her eyes, clearly noticing. Akira, whatever just went through your head, it was extremely rude. I wasn't thinking anything, Akira quickly denied. There was no way he was going to admit what had crossed his mind just now. Akeno let out a small laugh, then added warmly, while contracts can strengthen us, it's not like they'll skyrocket our power overnight, Akira. Especially if the contracts are made with ordinary humans. The effects are limited. Got it. That makes more sense now. Akira nodded quietly, choosing not to press the matter further. Deep down, he knew he wasn't exactly a fair comparison. In just 2 months, he'd gone from an ordinary human to someone capable of standing among ultimate-class fighters. Meanwhile, Rias, a noble-born devil, had taken over a decade to reach her current level, backed fully by her prestigious family. Akeno, the eldest member of her peerage, was currently at the mid-class level. Chiba and Konako were still classified as low-class devils. Even if they were considered promising for their generation, standing next to someone like Akira, who could only be described as a real-world cheater, wasn't exactly fair. Suddenly, a glowing magic circle lit up on the floor. Someone had activated a summoning. It's that guy again, hey, Konako-chan. Rias glanced to the side. Yes, Baku. I'll be going now, Konako replied in her usual deadpan tone, stepping into the circle and vanishing in a flash of light. Rias turned to Akira, who looked curious. That was a regular customer, she explained. A regular? Let me guess, an otaku. Rias gave him a small nod. A shut-in type. He always summons Konako-chan. Every time, just to play video games. For some reason, Akira's imagination started running wild, conjuring up strange mental images, titles like My Otaku Romance with a Devil Cat Girl or something just as ridiculous. What the hell is wrong with me? He muttered internally. This is what I get for writing too many light novels back in middle school. He's from a wealthy family, Rias continued, but he's the second son. His older brother is the heir, so he was mostly left alone. That's probably why he became a reclusive otaku. Every time he summons Konako-chan, it's just to game together. But Konako-chan's always satisfied with his payment. Payment? A week's worth of snacks. Yeah, that sounds like Konako-chan. That girl had 2 great loves, video games and sweets. Not long after, another magic circle lit up. This time, it was Chiba who stepped forward to take on a request. For the next 3 hours, Akira watched firsthand how modern devils worked. Everyone including Rias responded to multiple summoning requests. Among them, Konako held the record for the most contracts completed, followed by Akeno. Rias and Chiba came in last. At some point, Akira found himself reaching for a flyer lying on Rias's desk. Do you want your wish granted? That was all it said. One simple sentence. Beneath the text, the Gremory family crest shimmered faintly with demonic magic. The flyer itself served as a summoning medium, enchanted with teleportation magic. Asia, who had been sitting nearby, suddenly asked in her innocent tone, "Shin-san, is this what devils are really like? They seem so different from what I was taught." In the teachings she once followed, devils were evil, violent beings who thrived on human suffering. But what she was seeing now was completely different. "They've changed too, Asia. Times are always moving forward. Even devils have to adapt." "I see. I think I understand now." Seeing Asia nod softly, Akira could tell she had started to accept the existence of modern devils. And that, at least, was a good beginning. He slipped the flyer into his pocket and stretched his arms as he stood up. It was getting late. Time to head home. "Well then, let's call it a day." "Akira, let's go home," Rias said, smiling gently at him. "Yeah, let's go." Akira answered instinctively, but a second later, he frowned in realization. "Wait. Rias, when you say let's go home, don't tell me you mean together? We don't live anywhere near each other, right? Eh? But aren't lovers supposed to live together?" That innocent, radiant smile of hers sent a chill down Akira's spine. In that moment, he realized something terrifying. This woman, she's been planning this from the very beginning. She's totally after my body. Chapter 51, Morning Temptation. Chapter 51, Morning Temptation. The sun had just begun to peek through the gaps in the curtains when Akira slowly opened his eyes, greeted by the soft warmth of a brand new morning. But within seconds, he realized, something was wrong. His hand was touching something strange, something soft, smooth, and undeniably warm. The kind of sensation that made every nerve in his body react very inappropriately for this early hour. In a flash, he threw off the blanket only to be met with a sight he never expected to witness this soon after waking up. A girl, no, a stunning woman was lying beside him under the same blanket. Her long, dark hair spread like a waterfall over the pillow. She wore a loose, white nightgown that revealed more skin than it should have, thanks to her somewhat disheveled sleeping posture. The whole scene was like something straight out of a romantic fantasy, a dangerously vivid one. Morning already, the woman murmured groggily as she sat up. Her gown slipped slightly off one shoulder, revealing far too much of her bare skin. She wasn't wearing anything underneath. Akira unintentionally took in the view and immediately felt his blood boil. "Gee, good morning, Akira-kun," she said with a soft, teasing smile. "Akeno. Could you please fix your clothes first? And, this is my room. Why are you even here?" The woman Himejima Akeno only smiled more mischievously. "Because I don't accept this," she replied sweetly. "I was supposed to be first. But somehow, you ended up dating Rias. I'm not just going to sit back and let that happen." "Fake relationship," Akira said flatly, already exhausted. "That doesn't change the fact. And besides..." She leaned in closer, her breath warm against his skin. "Your first night still belongs to me, doesn't it?" Before he could respond, Akeno suddenly wrapped her arms around him and kissed him, stealing whatever protest was forming in his throat. Akira froze, his body reacting purely on instinct. The situation was far too intimate, far too real. "You're still so stiff, huh?" "But I like that," Akeno whispered playfully, her seductive grin nearly breaking his mental defenses. Stop it, Akeno." His face flushed deep red, and his whole body trembled from restraint. Right now, he couldn't afford to get out of bed. He never wore pajamas, just his underwear. In this situation, with Akeno sitting right beside him and his body reacting that way, if he stood up now, it'd be a social disaster of apocalyptic proportions. Meanwhile, Akeno stared at him closely. His handsome face paired with those long, emerald green strands falling over his shoulder gave off a strange, quiet allure. There's an old saying that most women have a hint of hidden bisexuality. Among girls, things like hugging, leaning close, or even casual kisses weren't unusual. But if a guy did the same, the line was obvious and immediate. And right now, with Akira looking the way he did, half awake, flustered, shirtless, he was just too tempting for Akeno to ignore. "Come on, Akira-kun. Let's get up. Rias will be here to call us any minute now. Then you go first." He wasn't planning to be the first one out from under the blanket. He needed time to calm down. Of course, Akeno realized the reason almost immediately. The way his hands clutched the blanket so tightly, that anxious yet curious glance, it was all too easy to read. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open. "Akira, have you seen Aiken?" Rias Gremory stood at the entrance, and froze. There he was, Akira, shirtless, his lower half covered only by a blanket, his cheeks flushed scarlet. And beside him, Himejima Akeno, wearing a wrinkled nightgown, her face equally red. "Sorry to intrude." With an icy tone and a blank expression, Rias quietly closed the door and left without waiting for an explanation. "Rias! Wait! It's not what it looks like!" Akira called out, scrambling upright. Too late. No matter what he said now, nothing would undo what she had seen. My, we've been caught," Akeno sang with a bright smile. "Don't joke around. You planned this, didn't you?" "Of course. I admit it's selfish, but, even if it's Rias, I didn't want to lose to her." Akeno rose from the bed, tying up her hair with a ribbon and fixing her nightgown. She knew exactly what she'd done. She'd crossed a line, overstepped her bounds as Rias's closest friend. Rias had chosen Akira first. But even knowing that, Akeno simply couldn't hold back. She wanted him before Rias did. Outside the room, Rias leaned against the hallway wall with her eyes closed. She'd heard everything. Every word. Every breath. She knew Akeno had said those things for her to hear. But Rias understood. Akeno had confessed before that she was starting to develop feelings for Akira. And as for Rias, she couldn't say she truly loved him. Their relationship was more of a decision, a strategy, with maybe a touch of genuine interest. Now, Akeno was simply moving ahead of her. And Rias could accept that. Later, Akeno stepped out of Akira's room. By the time Akira got dressed and finished his morning routine, he made his way downstairs to the dining area. There, he found both Himejima Akeno and Rias Gremory, two women who usually felt more like sisters than rivals, seated at the same table. But today, the atmosphere between them was different. A quiet, almost imperceptible tension hung in the air like a thin mist you couldn't see, but could definitely feel. Meanwhile, elsewhere, in the underworld, within the grand estate of the Phoenix family, one of the main noble households among the 72 pillars. "So you're telling me that my fiancé is now intimately involved with a human?" Riser Phoenix sat atop the family throne, his expression clearly one of discontent. Standing beside him was a breathtaking woman in a form-fitting maid outfit, tailored in the luxurious style typical of devil nobility. Anyone would be furious hearing their official fiancé was getting cozy with another man, especially a prideful young noble like Riser. "Yes, young master," the woman responded respectfully. This was a standard relationship between high-ranking devils and their familiars. A familiar turned devil through reincarnation wasn't an equal, they were personal servants. Only a few, like Rias Gremory, treated their peerage as family. Riser Phoenix, Rias's official fiancé, was the third son of the Phoenix family, pure-blood devil aristocrats, and one of the most prestigious among the 72 pillars. In the underworld, Riser was quite well known. His abilities in raiding games weren't to be underestimated. Thanks to the regenerative power inherited from the Phoenix bloodline, he was nearly unkillable in battle. Match record: 11 raiding games, 8 wins, 2 losses, 1 match terminated. Even the 2 losses weren't due to skill. They had been politically orchestrated outcomes for the sake of family alliances. In other words, Riser had never been truly defeated in a raiding game. The reason was simple: his immortality, amplified by the game system's rules, made his regenerative abilities practically invincible among devils of his tier. Yubelina, prepare everything. We're heading to the human world. As you command, Master. Yubelina responded without hesitation. As a devil reborn through the devil reincarnation ritual, her loyalty was absolute. For her, Riser's will was law. Chapter 52, The tension draws near. Chapter 52. The tension draws near. As always, life at Kuoh Academy went on as usual for Akira. Classes proceeded like any normal day, but his mind was drifting elsewhere. Schoolwork was hardly a challenge for someone who had once lived as an adult before arriving in this world. Even if his body had returned to a 15-year-old's, his way of thinking, his instincts remained mature. Yet, this morning's unexpected encounter with Hajime Akeno continued to echo in his thoughts. A stunning woman like Akeno approaching him so directly, it wasn't something he'd ever imagined happening in his life, past or present. And what disturbed him more than anything was the realization that he hadn't rejected her. As a man, and more importantly, as someone who had once been a grown adult, Akira understood exactly what kind of temptation he was facing. Akeno, after all, was the kind of woman that many men could only dream of. And so, the entire morning passed with him barely listening to a single word in class. "Shin-kun, someone's here to see you," a classmate called out as the lunch bell rang. Snapping out of his daze, Akira turned toward the doorway, and there they were. Two very familiar figures, Konako Tajao and Asia Argento. Asia had recently enrolled at Kuoh Academy and was now in the same class as Konako. Wearing the school uniform that complemented her small frame, she looked every bit like the gentle and adorable girl Akira had come to know. "Senpai. Bucko wants to see you," Konako said in her usual flat tone. "Rias is calling me." "Yes. She's waiting in the club room." "The Occult Research Club, hey?" "All right, let's go." Though puzzled as to why Rias would summon him in the middle of the day, Akira followed Konako and Asia toward the old school building that served as their base. "Bucko, we're back," Konako said as they entered the club room. "Thanks, Konako-chan," Rias replied with a nod. The moment Akira stepped inside, he noticed something odd. Everyone was already there: Rias Gremory, Hajime Akeno, Uedo Chiba, Konako Tajao, Asia Argento, and himself. The entire core peerage had been assembled. But the atmosphere was different this time. There was a tension in the air, subtle yet unmistakable. Rias herself looked far more serious than usual. "What's going on, Rias? Calling me in like this during lunch?" Akira asked calmly. "One of my brother's familiars just visited," she said quietly. "And? Riser is coming? Your fiancé?" "Yes." Her face grew stiff. Even though Rias had already made her decision to reject the arranged marriage, the fact that Riser was on his way still weighed heavily on her. His reputation in the underworld was no joke. In the rating game, he was nearly untouchable. His immortality made him virtually unbeatable under the game's mechanics. Rias knew Akira was strong. But facing an enemy who, by the rules of their world, simply couldn't be defeated, was another matter entirely. And after what happened that morning with Akeno, things had become more complicated. Akira had clearly shown that he wasn't indifferent to Akeno's feelings. If Akira ended up hurt because of this engagement, it would create a deep emotional rift not just between him and Rias, but between him and Akeno as well. "Akira, I need to ask again. Do you still want to go through with the deal we made before?" "Hey? What are you talking about? If you want to back out, I'll pretend like none of it ever happened." Rias glanced toward Akeno for a moment, and just like that, Akira understood. This wasn't about herself. This was about Akeno. Rias didn't want her best friend to suffer because of a decision she had made. That kind of selflessness raised Akira's respect for her. Willing to sacrifice her own plans for the sake of her peerage. That was the mark of a true leader. "If you really marry Riser, what happens to Akeno?" he asked, voice firm. I don't know. Why do you ask? Just give me your honest guess. Knowing Riser, Akeno would likely become his concubine. In the underworld's legal system, if I marry him, my peerage becomes his property whether they want it or not. It wasn't just speculation. That was the harsh reality of how Devil society worked. Familiars reincarnated through the Devil reincarnation ritual were treated as possessions of their master. I won't let that happen, Akira said quietly, but with unwavering conviction. Akeno belongs to me. There's no way I'd hand her over to a man like him. Akira. Akeno, standing just a few steps away, froze in place. Her eyes widened. Her body trembled slightly. It hit her harder than she expected. No matter how strong a woman might seem, words like those, spoken from the heart, could pierce through anything. So that's your answer, Rias said softly, a small smile curling at her lips. Looks like Akeno wasn't wrong to hope. Even though she knew Akeno had orchestrated this morning's little incident, Rias didn't resent it. If anything, she was quietly happy for both of them. Konako and Chiba, standing nearby, exchanged glances and looked toward Akira with renewed respect. Konako in particular had once been uneasy around him. She'd seen firsthand how brutally he had destroyed a stray devil. That memory had cast a shadow of fear. But now, that image was fading. A man who stood up for his comrades, who declared, without hesitation, that he would protect Akeno, was someone worth respecting. When's he arriving, Rias? I don't know. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe in a few days. Or maybe even in the next few seconds. She let out a small sigh. Grafia only came to warn me. She didn't give a clear schedule. I kind of hope he shows up soon, Akira said with a faint grin. I want to see for myself just how impressive the Phoenix bloodline and their so-called immortality really are. But before the tension could ease, a cold, arrogant voice echoed from the front of the room. Humph! A mere human dares compare himself to the pure-blooded Phoenix lineage? Don't overestimate your worth. Everyone stiffened. In the center of the club room, a glowing magic circle ignited on the floor. The symbols and patterns were unfamiliar, not Gremari in origin. A wave of intense heat and high-class devil pressure flooded the space. The guest had arrived. Chapter 53, Riser Phoenix. Chapter 53, Riser Phoenix. A crimson magic circle flared to life, followed by a surge of flames that filled the room with blistering heat. From within the swirling fire, two figures slowly emerged. The first was a blond man clad in a flamboyant red suit, wearing a smug and self-satisfied expression that reeked of arrogance. Beside him stood a strikingly beautiful woman in a maid outfit, her tall figure and flawless curves making her allure impossible to ignore even at a glance. Her presence was dangerously captivating. Riser. Rias Gremari's voice cut through the heat like ice. The moment she laid eyes on him, she slammed her hands on the table and rose from her seat. Her calm demeanor shattered, replaced with a stormy glare. It's been a while since I visited the human world, Riser said casually, eyes scanning the room. I forgot how charming it can be. I've come to take you home, Rias, my bride-to-be. He stepped forward, reaching a hand out as if to touch her cheek. But Rias recoiled, her face edged with disgust. The tension in the room spiked instantly. Everyone could feel it. Rias knew exactly who Riser Phoenix was. Not just the third son of the prestigious Phoenix family or the undefeated warrior of the raiding game. No, beyond the fame, he was a lecherous devil, a walking embodiment of lust and entitlement. Where most high-class devils selected their peerage members based on talent or combat capability to strengthen their lineage, Riser chose differently. His entire peerage was made up of women, each handpicked to fulfill a particular fantasy. Some were elegant, others cute, some tomboyish, some sultry. He even went as far as to make his own younger sister one of his bishops to complete his twisted little sister ideal. Among female devils, he was a reviled figure. Disgusting. Obsessive. Dangerous. Of all his peerage, only one held genuine combat value, Yubelina, the infamous bomb queen. The rest were little more than glorified trophies. Riser's victories in the raiding game had less to do with teamwork and everything to do with his absurd regenerative power and overwhelming fire-based abilities. Keep dreaming, Riser. I'm not marrying you, Rias said coldly. Rias, stop being so stubborn. You know what this marriage means for both our families. That has nothing to do with me. I'll only marry someone I truly love. And that's not you. After the Great War between the three factions, many pure-blood devils died. This isn't just about our families, it's about preserving our bloodlines. That's your problem. A decision forced on me by my father and brother? No thanks. Give up already. I see. Then even if I have to burn your entire peerage to ashes, I will bring you back to the underworld. You dare! Rias exploded with rage. For her, her peerage wasn't just a group of servants. They were her family. Threatening them was the same as threatening her very heart. Everyone around her braced themselves: Akino, Chiba, Konako, and Asia. Each of them knew the kind of opponent Riser was. His aura alone marked him as a dangerous high class. And truth be told, he was slightly stronger than Rias in raw power. Then suddenly, the sharp sound of metal slicing through air echoed in the room. A long chain shot forward, passing inches from Riser's forehead, just barely grazing his golden locks. A sacred gear, chain type, hey? So you're the human Rias has taken a liking to. Riser turned his gaze toward the green-haired young man standing calmly on the far side of the room. With his refined features and composed aura, Shin Akira carried a presence that was threatening, even to someone like Riser. And that made Riser furious. He was a noble of House Phoenix born into privilege and strength. How could someone like him be overshadowed by a mere human? But not only had Rias chosen Akira over him, she had protected him, stood by him, and even declared it openly. Riser Phoenix. I've been looking forward to meeting you, Akira said with a faint smile. To Akira, the man before him wasn't a threat. No, he was more like a living treasure chest, a walking trove of rare experiences and power waiting to be claimed. A high-class devil with elite abilities and a decorated peerage? For someone like Akira, who saw the world through the lens of strategy and opportunity, Riser wasn't dangerous, he was valuable. Then let's see what kind of power Rias has chosen. Riser's eyes narrowed. His killing intent flared like a tidal wave. He didn't want to just defeat Akira. He wanted to humiliate him, grind him down until there was nothing left. But Akira's gaze didn't waver. There was no fear in his expression, only cold detachment. Would you pity your prey before the hunt? Of course not. All that mattered was how much you could gain from its defeat. Flames erupted at Riser's feet, rising like a geyser. The fire wrapped around his body, flaring wildly before shooting toward Akira in the shape of a coiling phoenix serpent. It was the fire of the Phoenix clan immortal flame, passed down through generations. This sacred fire didn't only grant extreme regeneration and resilience, it could also neutralize most forms of magic and physical damage. Within the rules of the raiding game, it was practically unbeatable. But just as the serpent of flame neared Akira, a streak of white lightning crackled across the air. A thunderous roar shook the walls as a dragon formed from divine electricity tore through the flames. In an instant, the phoenix fire was shredded and dispersed. Heavenly lightning, Akira's blue lightning light. A divine electrical force that surpassed even the regenerative flames of Phoenix. And when it came to energy control, Akira was leagues above Riser. Oh? White lightning, is it? Not bad, Riser scoffed. But if that's all you've got, it won't be enough. His flames surged again, wilder and more chaotic. They burst from his back like wings of a raging phoenix, filling the room with a suffocating heat. But across from him, Akira's own aura flared. The white lightning coiled around him like a colossal dragon, snarling and crackling in anticipation. Fire and lightning, the two forces clashed in the air, turning the club room into a battlefield of gods. But before either side could make the next move, another crimson magic circle flared to life. This time, the symbols bore the mark of the House of Gremory. From the magic circle stepped a woman with silver hair and a presence that immediately crushed the atmosphere in the room. "That's enough." Her voice was cold and commanding. Instantly, an oppressive pressure filled the space, forcing even seasoned devils to freeze where they stood. Riser stumbled back a half step, his flames flickering out. His face twisted not in arrogance, but in fear. Akira narrowed his eyes and allowed his lightning to fade. He knew that aura. He knew exactly who had arrived. "Graphia? Why are you here?" Rias asked, visibly surprised. "Graphia Lucifuge, wife of Surtsk's Lucifer. Personal maid to the Gremory household. Queen of Surtsk's peerage. And a being feared throughout the underworld as the silver-haired Queen of Annihilation." Though her official title was made, every devil knew crossing Graphia was the same as declaring war on Amu. Even Riser Fenix, with all his pride and bloodline, dared not act rashly in her presence. Because in the underworld, power is everything. And Graphia was absolute power. Chapter 54, Information Public Address Loudspeaker New Novel Announcement. Hello everyone! Sparkles, it's me, Fons Kun, bringing you some exciting news. A brand new translated fanfiction has officially launched for all of you. Open book title, With a Mortal's Body, I Carve My Fate as a Heroic Spirit. The free chapters are now available on web novel. Simply visit my profile or search for the title, hand pointing right. With a Mortal's Body, I Carve My Fate as a Heroic Spirit. This story is filled with thrilling battles, deep emotions, and an epic journey that will keep you hooked. Sparkles, but that's not all. I'm also working on several other fanfiction projects that are just as exciting. High Voltage Sign from Thunder Breathing to the Multiverse Cyclone Becoming Enkidu and DxD Water Wave, and many more. If you'd like to read more chapters, get early access, and enjoy daily updates, you can support me on Patreon, hand pointing right, patreon.com/FAANSKUN right bracket sparkles plus. There are also exclusive novels not yet released on web novel, such as Leaf Fluttering in Wind Naruto, The White Shura of the Hotaki Clan Hot Beverage. Or if you'd simply like to show some small support, you can do so through Ko-Fi, hand pointing right ko-fi.com/FAANSKUN right bracket fire. Let's bring these stories to life together, chapter by chapter, until we reach their epic conclusions. Thank you so much for all your support. Sparkling Heart Fons Kun. Chapter 55, Let's have a rating game. Chapter 54, Let's have a rating game. Akira stared at Graphia Lucifuge, now standing just a few paces away from him, and he had to admit something silently in his heart. The difference between them was still enormous. And what made it even more terrifying was the fact that this woman wasn't your average Mu-class devil. Graphia hailed from the Lucifuge clan, the main branch that had long served the House of Lucifer as its most elite retainers. She had once taken part in the underworld's civil war, standing with the reformist faction against the old Mu bloodlines. Her power and battlefield exploits earned her recognition across the entire underworld. Her reputation wasn't just for show. She was not only a queen-class devil who had served directly under Surtsk's Lucifer, but also the strongest queen in the history of the rating game. It was said that her relationship with Surtsk's hadn't come from love at first sight, but had been forged through countless battles and hardships, an unshakable bond formed in the fires of war. Even Seraphal Leviathan, the current Mu Leviathan, had once been her rival. The two competed fiercely for the title of strongest female devil in the underworld. In both strength and status, Graphia was indisputably one of the most elite beings in existence. "Graphia, why are you here?" Rias asked, keeping her voice composed despite the suffocating pressure in the air. Among everyone in the room, only Rias managed to stay calm. Then again, she was Graphia's master in name, and more importantly, the younger sister of Surtsk's Lucifer, Graphia's husband. Their bond was familial as well as political. This situation was already anticipated by both Lord Gremory and Lord Lucifer. Grafia replied calmly. If Lady Rias insists on rejecting her arranged engagement, then the fairest way to settle this is through a rating game. A rating game. Rias instinctively turned her eyes toward Akira. In this moment, he was her one and only hope. And not just Rias. Riser's gaze also locked onto Akira with a sharp, dangerous intensity. He was eager. Eager to crush Rias's hopes right before her eyes. Eager to humiliate the human who dared to defy him. I'm not a devil, Akira said coolly, but can I still participate in this rating game as an external fighter? All eyes turned toward him. Akira's gaze didn't waver. He looked directly at Grafia, his eyes steady and full of resolve. Grafia stared back in silence, her silver eyes unreadable. But in their depths, there was a faint flicker of approval. She had read every report available about Shin Akira before coming here. He wasn't a native of either Japan or the underworld. His connection to the Satrai family was thin at best, and his attendance at Kuoh Academy was thanks only to a temporary arrangement. He had no formal status within Devil Society. However, this man wielded two sacred gears. One of them was a Longinus, a god-class sacred gear. The other was a chain-type sacred gear, one that had proven highly adaptable and lethal. He had even once stood toe-to-toe with Azazel, former Governor-General of the Fallen Angels. And he survived. Even though Azazel had clearly held back, the fact that Akira had walked away from that clash was proof enough of his caliber. That decision rests with Riser-sama, Grafia finally answered. This is, after all, a rating game between Riser Fenix and Rias Gremory. Everyone turned to Riser. I accept. Of course I accept. Riser laughed, loud and mocking. Consider yourself lucky, human. Participating in a rating game among high-class devils is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Savor it while you can. His tone was dripping with sarcasm. To Riser, Akira was nothing. A mongrel with no bloodline, no prestige, no title. Without Rias, he wouldn't have even warranted a glance. Well then, I suppose I should thank you, Akira replied casually. I'll make sure to return the favor, thoroughly. Humph. I'll be waiting, human. A dangerous spark flared between them. Whatever the original reason for this match had been, it no longer mattered. Now, it was about pride. About domination. Two men, locked in a challenge to utterly defeat and humiliate each other. Even with this little human on your side, Rias, is this really all you've got? Riser sneered, casting a mocking glance around the room. Rias, Akira, Konako, Akeno, and Asia, barely 5 of them. And Asia wasn't even a full peerage member yet. Their numbers were pathetic compared to his. With a cocky grin, Riser snapped his fingers. A pillar of flame erupted, and a burning magic circle flared to life in the middle of the room. One by one, his peerage members appeared, 14 devils in total. With Yubelina at his side, that made 15. Every evil piece in his set had been used to fill his peerage. But therein lay another issue: most of his servants were weak. Especially the pawns, 8 of them, each only worth a single piece. Their low ranks were telling. Quantity means nothing if the quality's trash, Rias said coolly. If I wanted to, I could gather a stronger peerage than this in no time. You dare say that, Rias? Riser raised an eyebrow, but his voice wasn't angry. He didn't care. His peerage wasn't a tactical unit, it was a harem. A personalized collection of women who fit every possible archetype he enjoyed. Power? That was secondary. He believed he alone could carry any rating game on his back. TCH. You're disgustingly greedy, turkey boy, Akira muttered. Besides the maid at your side and that fire-haired girl in the back, the rest are basically background props. Don't even compare them to Rias, Akeno, heck, they don't even measure up to 10% of Konako's ability. You dare insult my peerage, human? Riser snapped. It was one thing to be mocked by Rias, they were equals in status and power. But from a mere human? Oh? Did that sting a little? How dare you? Riser's body erupted in flames, and a stream of burning phoenix fire shot straight toward Akira's face. But Akira didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still, watching the flames draw closer, calm, unreadable. Then Graphia stepped in front of him with a single smooth motion. She flicked her fingers. The flames scattered and vanished, like dust swept away by a breeze. Gone. As if they had never existed. If you wish to fight, Riser-sama, Graphia said in an icy voice, please wait until the rating game begins. TCH fine. Since the silver-haired Queen of Annihilation herself asked. I'll let it slide. Thank you for your understanding. Riser turned back to Akira, his eyes narrowing. Treasure what's left of your life, human. Because soon, it won't belong to you anymore. Once more, fire surged around Riser's group. A towering blaze enveloped all 15 of them. And in a flash they vanished, whisked away by teleportation magic. Because of official rules, a rating game couldn't be held on the spot. It required registration, venue approval, and referee assignment. The entire process would take several days. And for now, Riser was gone. But everyone in that room knew one thing, the battle was already set. And the day of reckoning was drawing near. Chapter 56, Before the Battle. Chapter 55. Before the battle. After Riser vanished from the room, Graphia's gaze immediately turned to Rias. This is your final chance, Rias-sama. I know, Graphia. Her voice was cold. There was no effort to hide the irritation in her tone because every step Graphia took was, in essence, a message from her brother, Surtsk's Lucifer. And so, some of the resentment she felt toward her brother and father naturally spilled over onto Graphia as well. But Graphia was already used to Rias's stubbornness. She had practically helped raise her from childhood. As Surtsk's wife, Graphia was more than just a maid, she was like an older sister, perhaps even a maternal figure. Both she and Surtsk had always showered Rias with affection and care. If it weren't for that bond, Rias's arranged marriage would have been set in stone, impossible to overturn under the rigid traditions of the underworld's noble families. The only precedent had been Sana Satrai, who escaped her own arranged marriage thanks to the outrageous intervention of her older sister, Sirafal Leviathan. Sirafal had defied all authority, family, peerage, and government for the sake of her little sister. But Rias's situation was much more complicated. Surtsk loved her dearly, but he couldn't act as recklessly as Sirafal. As a one of the four Satans, his hands were tied by duty, by the weight of his title, and by the structure of devil society. Please do your best, Rias-sama, Graphia said with a small bow. Leave it to me. In that case, Rias-sama, Shin Akira-sama, I'll report everything that happened here directly to Surtsk's Lucifer-sama. As her words fell, a red magic circle appeared beneath her feet. Wrapped in a soft crimson glow, Graphia vanished, teleporting back to the underworld. The room fell silent. Rias let out a breath and collapsed back into her chair, the strength in her legs giving out beneath the pressure of everything that had just happened. She never expected Riser to act this quickly. There was supposed to be nearly a year left before the arranged marriage deadline. But Riser had grown impatient and brought everything to the front lines directly to Kuoh Academy. This was well beyond what she had anticipated. Akira, are you really confident you can win? She took a deep breath to calm herself, then looked at him directly. Just leave it to me, Akira said without hesitation. On the day of the rating game, you all just stay in position. I'll handle the entire fight myself. You're saying you'll take on all of Riser's peerage by yourself? That's the plan. You've gone insane. Even if you've reached the level of an ultimate class devil, that doesn't mean you can let your guard down. Riser may be a high-class devil, but his power is nothing to scoff at. We need to plan carefully. We need a team strategy. There's no need. I'll finish it. Shin Akira. Rias, he said gently. You know Riser is strong. But from the very beginning, you've never actually seen my true strength, have you? Those words stopped her in her tracks. Her mind flashed back to their first real fight, the one where she and Akeno had faced off against Akira. They had been defeated in minutes. Even then, she had known that Akira wasn't fighting seriously. Sure, she hadn't gone all out either, but the result had been clear. The gap in power between them was unmistakable. Now, he stood before her as an ultimate class existence, wielding not just a Longinus class sacred gear like boosted gear, but also a second gear with chain-based abilities. He commanded divine lightning and had the rare power to draw energy directly from the earth itself. Put all of that together, and there was no way to call him just a human anymore. He was a monster. As that thought settled in her mind, the hesitation in Rias's heart began to fade. Her eyes sharpened, filled now with conviction. She had already made her choice. She had already put her faith in this man. There was no turning back now. The die had been cast. I believe in you. And I won't let you down. Something subtle shifted between them in that moment. A connection that had already begun to form was now starting to deepen. This wasn't just trust, it was a wager. One that would determine the future of Rias Gremory. Time passed slowly. Preparations for the raiding game were underway. As noted in the history of the original world, before any official battle, it was tradition for the peerage to undergo intense training. News from the underworld finally arrived. The match had been scheduled 1 week from today. A week approved by Riser himself. Or rather, likely granted as some sort of condescending mercy. A chance for Akira to enjoy his remaining days before the inevitable defeat. From Riser's perspective, the result had already been decided. Giving them extra time was simply a gesture of pity. Meanwhile, Rias and her peerage had relocated to the Gremory family's private training villa deep in the mountains. And because of the incident with Riser, Asia had finally made her decision. She accepted Rias's offer to join her peerage as a bishop. Through her time with them, Asia had come to understand that Rias and the others weren't evil devils like the church had always claimed. In fact, they were the ones who had saved her life, and welcomed her with warmth. Now, in Rias's time of need, Asia was ready to give everything she had for the girl who had rescued her. All right, everyone, Rias said firmly, standing before her peerage. We have 7 days. Let's use that time to become stronger. As the president of the Occult Research Club and as their king, Rias was the heart of the team. Understood, Baku. Chiba replied with a confident grin. Yes, Akeno added with her usual gentle smile. Roger, Konako said quietly, but resolutely. I'll do my very best. Asia exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with determination. And just like that, their intense training began. A great battle loomed just over the horizon. One that would not only decide Rias's fate, but also test the strength, trust, and resolve of her entire team, and above all, prove once and for all that Rias's faith in Shin Akira had not been misplaced. Chapter 57, Training. Chapter 56 Training. Jima Akeno, Konako Tajao, Uedo Chiba, and Asia Argento, all 4 of them dove into their training with fierce determination. The air around the villa crackled with energy, fueled by resolve. But Akira? He didn't join them right away. To him, brute force physical training wasn't the key to growth. Not anymore. His strength came from a different source, one no one else here had, the template inheritance system, a power unique only to him. Akira, what's your plan for the next 7 days? Rias asked, approaching him quietly. I'll be supporting everyone's training, I suppose, he replied calmly, hands in his pockets. You're helping us. I just broke into the ultimate class. At this point, I won't gain much from physical training alone. Any further progress will take time and a lot of it. Rias gave a slow nod. That made perfect sense. In the underworld, those who advanced beyond high class and reached the ranks of the mole were extremely rare. Once someone crossed into the ultimate class, further growth required deep accumulation years, decades even. It wasn't something that happened in a week. So, Akira's reasoning was entirely logical from her perspective. Of course, she had no idea that Akira wasn't just a human with sacred gears. His strength didn't grow through conventional means. Thanks to the inheritance system, he could gain tremendous power in a blink so long as the percentage of template synchronization increased. Senpai, please train with me. The voice came from Konako Tajao, soft, serious, and filled with resolve. She stood in front of him, both fists clenched and wrapped in gloves, ready for combat. She had never witnessed Akira fight firsthand, but she knew he had stood against someone from the House of Phoenix without flinching. That alone was enough to stir her curiosity. You want to spar with me, Konako-chan? Physical training is most effective when done through actual combat. And, please don't call me that. Akira gave a relaxed smile. Since Konako-chan asked so sweetly, how could I say no? Her eyebrow twitched. And without another word, she launched the first punch, no warning, no hesitation. It was fast. But Akira casually caught her fist in his palm. The gap between them was massive. He didn't even need to exert effort to block it. Konako stepped back and rushed in again, unleashing a rapid barrage of strikes powered by her yokai strength. Her movements were fierce and determined but wild. Driven by instinct rather than refined technique. She still didn't fully understand how to draw out her true power. Akira silently activated Beast King's instinct, a combat intuition he inherited from Enkidu, the living weapon once created to challenge gods. With that instinct, paired with Enkidu's unmatched martial prowess and ability to read opponents, Akira was more than capable of coaching someone like Konako. That's not how you use your strength. With one hand, he caught her wrist, twisted it gently, and tossed her into the air with perfect control. She landed hard but clean, rolling to her feet with a grunt. When she looked up, he was gone. Her instincts flared. She went on full alert. From afar, Rias and the others could see everything. Akira's speed had completely outclassed Konako's. He had vanished from her sight in an instant. Attacking isn't about throwing your whole body forward in blind force, his voice echoed as he reappeared behind her. It's about knowing the exact moment and angle to unleash the most efficient strike. A precise blow landed on Konako's side, sending her tumbling to the ground. The force wasn't overwhelming but perfectly matched to her own power level. Same strength. Different result. This was the gap between raw muscle and real technique. You're strong, senpai, Konako said through shallow breaths, pushing herself up. Of course, Akira answered, flashing a faint smile. Konako-chan, your physical strength is exceptional. But that's not your true power. He wasn't just speaking based on what he knew from the original story. He could feel it now firsthand. Inside Konako was a deeply rooted energy. Pure, natural, and potent. It pulsed like the breath of the earth itself. It was spiritual energy, the kind used by senjutsu practitioners. As someone blessed by the earth and nature himself, Akira was especially attuned to such forces. He could sense that energy as clearly as breathing. But he also knew Konako was still afraid of it. Still chained to her trauma. Konako didn't respond. Instead, she attacked again. Akira didn't push her. He didn't press for answers. Emotional scars couldn't be erased with a few kind words or a single fight. So, instead, he guided her. Over the course of their sparring, he subtly shifted her fighting style, teaching her to understand angles, flow, and timing. He taught her how to feel her strength rather than just swing it around. As a Nikomata-yukai, her potential was undeniable. She was still young, still growing, and with just the right amount of guidance, she could bloom into a true warrior. Rias and the others quietly watched the exchange for a while, then returned to their own training. Rias focused on refining her power of destruction, the inherited ability of the Gremory bloodline. Chiba Uedo pushed forward in both demonic sword creation and his personal swordsmanship. Meanwhile, Akeno took on the role of instructor for Asia, teaching her the basics of demonic power control. As a former nun, Asia had a long way to go, but her heart was in the right place. Everything was moving smoothly. Back on the training field, Konako was thrown once again. Her uniform was covered in dirt, and sweat clung to her skin. She was panting heavily now. Ha, ha, ha. She tried to stand, but her legs finally gave out. Her small frame slumped to the ground, unable to continue. "You win," she muttered with a strained smile. The moment the words left her lips, a soft chime echoed in Akira's ears, audible only to him. Ding! You have gained 1% template inheritance. Konako Tajao, until now, the only member of the Occult Research Club who hadn't been defeated directly by him. Even if it was just a training match, the moment she admitted defeat, the system acknowledged it as a win. 1% might sound small. But in Akira's world, even 1% was gold. "How do you feel?" he asked, tossing her a towel. "I learned a lot, thank you, senpai." Konako looked up at him. And for the first time, she truly understood the distance between herself and this man. Not just in power but in experience, skill, and composure. He stood at the summit, calm and unshaken. To reach that height, she still had a long road ahead. But for the first time she wanted to chase after him. Chapter 58, The Fear Within. Chapter 57, The Fear Within. Konako. I don't know why you're rejecting the true power inside you. But if you keep ignoring it and chasing something else instead, then all you're doing is wasting the incredible gift you were born with. I'm sorry. She sat on the ground with her head bowed, her voice barely audible. She didn't offer an explanation, only a quiet apology. But Akira could feel it. Her refusal wasn't rooted in pride or ignorance, it came from fear. A deep, paralyzing fear buried inside her heart. And in that moment, the memory returned. That night, the night she could never erase. Her sister, once kind and gentle, had lost control. Right in front of her eyes, she'd slaughtered their master in a frenzied rage. The image of that lifeless body lying in a pool of blood, the stench of iron thick in the air, and the shattering realization that someone she'd loved so dearly could become that it carved a wound into her soul. That fear had taken root inside her. It never left. She was terrified. Not just of the power, but of what it could do to her. Of what she might become. Terrified that one day, she'd lose control. That she'd hurt the people she now called family: Rias, Akeno, Chiba, Asia. So she chose to suppress it. Not because she hated it. But because she was scared of it. Don't apologize to me, Konako. No one can make that choice for you. But at the very least, don't make a decision today that you'll regret for the rest of your life. What do you mean? If I hadn't shown up, and things went just like they did in the original timeline, if Rias had to face Riser Phoenix in the raiding game, would you have used that power to protect her? She didn't respond. But her silence was the answer. She wouldn't have. Just like in the world he remembered. That's why I'm saying this: don't live with regret. If Rias loses and is forced to marry someone she doesn't love, if she has to spend her life with that man, could you live with that? You might be able to hold back the guilt now, but what about years from now? Akira looked at her gently, but firmly. That regret, it'll only grow. Even if no one blames you, you'll keep blaming yourself. But, senpai. I know. You have your reasons. Wounds. Fears. Secrets too heavy to share. But unless you tell someone, no one can help you. After what happened with Akeno, after he'd taken away Hyudo-Issei's luck, Akira had started to wonder. Could he actually unlock the classic power of protagonists everywhere? Talk no jutsu. In so many worlds, even the most hardened enemies had been swayed by the power of words, most notably, Uzumaki Naruto, who shattered centuries of hatred with nothing but honesty in heart. Maybe, just maybe. Konako's shoulders trembled. Her small frame seemed to shrink, no longer the tough, stoic girl she always pretended to be. For the first time, she looked fragile. Like a little girl. Senpai. If one day I turn into a monster, what should I do? Why would you say something like that? Because, my sister, and finally, the dam broke. Konako spoke. She told him everything. About her older sister, once loving and protective, who lost herself in rage and murdered their master. About how she fled, branded a criminal by the underworld. About how she left Konako behind, and how all of it stemmed from a power they couldn't control. That trauma, those memories were the reason she shut herself off. Answer me one thing, Konako. Your sister, she loved you, didn't she? Since you were little. Yet. She meant everything to me. Her voice shook as the memories flooded back. Back then, her sister had been her whole world until that world shattered. Did you ever think, maybe she didn't go crazy? Maybe she wasn't blinded by rage. What if she was trying to protect you? What? The love between sisters, especially an older sister and her little sister, is powerful. If you were in danger, she might have given up everything. Even her soul. Just to save you. But then why did she kill our master? That's something only your sister can answer. Akira shook his head and offered a small smile. Of course, he knew the truth. In the original story, the explanation had been clear. But there was no way he could say that aloud. He wasn't a Gremari. He wasn't part of her past. If he spoke too much, the others would start asking questions that could expose secrets he couldn't afford to reveal. But then, a new voice entered the scene. Calm. Mature. Beautiful. I'll explain it instead. They both turned. Rias Gremari stood there. This time, she wore glasses and a more casual outfit, something elegant, quiet, and scholarly. For a second, Akira was taken aback. The crimson-haired devil princess looked less like a noble and more like a literature major from a human university. Refined. Intelligent. Striking in a whole new way. Bibuku. Konako, Rias said gently. I looked into it a while ago through my brother. The family you and your sister served under, they were conducting secret experiments on yokai bodies. There's no hard proof, but you and your sister were likely test subjects. What? Konako's whole body froze. Her eyes widened. Her skin turned pale. The master who raised them had tried to use them as lab rats? If that was true. And if she linked that to what Akira had said earlier, then suddenly, everything started to make sense. Her sister's rage. The bloodshed. The desperate escape. It all aligned. But the worst part wasn't the truth. It was the realization that for all these years, she had hated her sister because she didn't understand. Because she had misunderstood everything. And that truth hurt more than anything else. Chapter 59, Beginning to Open Her Heart. Chapter 58, Beginning to Open Her Heart. If your sister did all of that to protect you, then everything makes sense. Rias spoke softly, her calm voice weaving gently into the silence. After the incident, there was a quiet internal investigation. We found traces of evidence supporting the theory. That household was dismantled and judged within the underworld system. But, to avoid political and social fallout, the details were never made public. Experiments like that, yeah, they're not uncommon, Akira added with a quiet nod. Human experimentation wasn't something unheard of in this world. Even the church, wrapped in its holy image, was far from clean. Take the Holy Sword Project, for example, where children with potential compatibility were selected, then forced through painful experiments to fuse with sacred swords. The project had since been refined and standardized, but its early stages were nothing less than blood-soaked sacrifices. Nowhere was truly pure. Not heaven, not the angels. Even they had their sins. Just look at Asia Argento. Cast out of the church by none other than Archangel Michael himself, her sacred gear, smile of the Holy Mother, deemed too precious and too dangerous. For the sake of balance, she was exiled, and nearly killed by fallen angels. Why? Bucku, why didn't you ever tell me? Konako's voice trembled. And, why is my sister still labeled a criminal in the underworld? Konako, it's complicated, Rias replied gently. The family that raised you had strong ties to certain political factions. Even my brother Amu couldn't intervene easily. All we could do, was protect you. Oni-sama. At last, the tears she had held back for so long began to fall. One by one, they streamed down her cheeks, crystalline droplets of pain, regret, and longing. And for the first time, something changed in the atmosphere around them. A subtle warmth spread through the space, soft and quiet. As if the invisible wall around Konako's heart had finally begun to crack. Akira said nothing in response to Ria's words. He just stood there, silent. Because while most of what Rias said was true, it wasn't the whole truth. 70% fact. 30% omission. The deeper reality behind it, the shadowy involvement of the underworld's higher circles, couldn't be denied. Those experiments were likely never the ambition of one family alone. No, they were part of something broader. A systematic and organized effort, likely backed at least quietly by elite figures. To claim that Surtsk's Lucifer, one of the most powerful beings in existence, lacked the power to intervene, was a stretch. Surtsk's true strength rivaled the likes of a god of destruction. Even the most stubborn high-class devils and political councils moved carefully around him. If he truly wanted to shut down those experiments, he could have done it. But he didn't. Not because he couldn't. But because there was no reason urgent enough for him to get directly involved. And perhaps, just perhaps, to allow Rias to gain a powerful rook. A loyal one. A broken girl with nowhere else to go, who would cling to Rias like a lifeline. In Devil Society, reputation meant everything. Kurika's murder of her master had nearly dragged Konako down with her. Even as a child, Konako had been viewed with suspicion. With contempt. But Rias, she extended her hand anyway. In the midst of prejudice and fear, she offered warmth. And from that kindness, unwavering loyalty was born. A bond stronger than any contract, a peerage member willing to risk everything for her king. Akira understood that. Deeply. And because he understood, he chose to say nothing more. If he had been in Surtsk's place, he might have made the same choice. Supporting your little sister by placing someone truly devoted at her side? Strategically, it made perfect sense. Then suddenly a ripple in the air. From within Konako, still held in Rias' arms, a powerful surge of Yuki burst forth, natural and unrestrained. Like a dam finally breaking, the energy that had been suppressed for so long came pouring out. It wasn't wild or violent. Instead, it flowed with gentle harmony, resonating with the surrounding nature as if the earth itself welcomed its return. The essence of the wild. The whisper of forest winds. The heartbeat of spring soil. It was pure Yukai energy, refined, controlled, and deeply rooted in the natural world. And with that, Konako's strength skyrocketed, shattering the limits she'd placed on herself for so long. Snow-white cat ears emerged atop her head, twitching slightly. A fluffy tail of the same color swayed behind her. This was her true form. Konako, descendant of the Nikomata, the last of her kind, had finally begun to accept the heritage she once feared. But this transformation didn't spark chaos. No. It brought peace. It was as if the power sleeping deep within her had finally been acknowledged and welcomed. In the middle of the field, under the astonished gazes of everyone present, Akira stood quietly, watching it all unfold. Finally, she'd let it out. A small smile formed on his lips. To some, it might seem like just a small step forward. But for Konako, it was a giant leap toward a future no longer shadowed by fear. She was no longer a frightened girl, hiding behind walls of silence and trauma. She was beginning to stand on her own 2 feet. With her own strength. Chapter 60, Ria's Complaint. Chapter 59, Ria's Complaint. A wave of energy burst through the air, echoing across the sky like a thunderclap. Within the training arena, 2 figures clashed fiercely, their silhouettes flickering and colliding at blinding speed. One of them was Akira, clad in pristine white, in odd contrast to the fierce battlefield aura around him. His opponent was Konako Tiju, now in her awakened Nikomata form, having tapped into the primal power deep within her. Her white hair flowed like a ghostly flame, and her eyes gleamed with the raw, untamed energy of life Yuki. But she was still young. Despite awakening her senjutsu abilities, Konako hadn't yet fully grasped how to control the life force surging through her. She had the instincts but not the mastery. Only recently had she come to terms with the trauma that once chained her heart, finally choosing to embrace the power she'd sealed away long ago. And for that journey, Akira had become her perfect sparring partner. Which led to this moment countless mock battles that slowly but surely helped Konako sharpen her understanding of senjutsu. Still, to truly grow stronger, what she needed wasn't just a partner but a proper teacher. Someone who had truly mastered the art of Yuki and its complex flow. Akira, while incredibly strong, simply wasn't built for that role. Their systems of power were fundamentally different. He could guide her to a point, but not beyond it. There was only one person truly suited for that position: Kurika, Konako's older sister. Currently under Vala Lucifer's banner, Kurika had grown into a terrifying force in her own right, her power now vast and immeasurable. She looks happy, doesn't she, Rias? From the sidelines of the arena, 2 girls stood watching the duel. One of them, Akeno Himejima, stared at Konako with a bittersweet expression. Konako had found a way to emerge from the darkness of her past. But what about her? Akeno had opened up once, shared her pain with Akira, bared her wounds. But that didn't mean her burdens had been lifted. Not completely. She still loathed the fallen angel blood flowing through her veins. Even now, she rejected the power inherited from her lineage. If given the choice, she would rather die than accept that side of herself. It's been years, Akeno, Rias Gremory said quietly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Even Konako's finally made peace with herself. So what about you? Rias's eyes flicked to her childhood friend. In truth, her entire peerage felt like a collection of wounded souls. Konako, once cold and distant, had refused to trust anyone outside a select few. She'd locked herself away in silence, and even now, traces of that past lingered. Then there was Akeno, the one Rias knew best. Her pain wasn't a mystery. Akeno herself knew that her father had always loved her deeply. But that didn't erase the fact that her mother had died while her father wasn't there. That loss had carved a deep scar in her heart, one that had never fully healed. And it wasn't just Akeno. Uedo Chiba still carried the bitter memories of betrayal and death. He wore his smile like armor, but Rias knew the sorrow hidden beneath it. And Gaspar Viladia Dumper, who had been sealed for years. A socially anxious shut-in, with a tendency to cross-dress so convincingly, even the other guys had to look twice. Thinking about all of them made Rias's head throb. Was this really good fortune, or a curse in disguise? Akeno. Rias started gently. Do you think you can still be saved, like Konako-chan? There was a pause before Akeno replied. You mean, by him? She glanced toward Akira, who was still in the middle of training Konako. He looked at her with such gentle eyes. Like an older brother doting on his precious little sister. Especially now, with Konako in her adorable cat-girl form, Akira never seemed able to say no to her. He can, Rias said firmly. You've already taken the first step, haven't you? Out of the darkness. The first step, hey. Akeno's thoughts drifted to that day. Her black wings, the very thing she had always hated. And yet, Akira hadn't recoiled. He had called them beautiful. Just a few simple words, but somehow, they had stirred something in her heart. Something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Was her heart really that easy to sway? And more importantly, did she even deserve this kind of happiness? What are you thinking about? Rias's voice cut through her silence. Akeno. If Akira wins the next rating game, Akeno said quietly, can I ask you for one thing? Rias blinked. What kind of request? Before I regret it, please win over his heart and his body for me. What? Rias's voice came out flat. Calm, but laced with suspicion. I'm just trying to push you forward, Akeno replied with a faint smile. To stop you from holding back. Funny. I remember someone sneaking into my room late at night just to show me something. And now you're cheering me on. Because to a man, Akeno said, voice low and wistful, his first woman will always hold a special place in his heart. Then why haven't you? Rias stopped herself mid-sentence. Because in love, everyone was selfish, herself included. But there was something strange about Akeno today. It felt like she was saying goodbye. Maybe it was just a hunch, but that feeling clung stubbornly in Rias's chest. You're better for him than I am, Akeno said, her smile now tinged with sorrow. You're his master. The future head of House Gremory. In every way that matters, it should be you. So you're content being second place? Akeno, is that really how low you think of yourself? I don't have a choice. I've always been tainted from the beginning. Her voice was calm, but every word stabbed like a knife. Akeno, why would you think that? Your father is, don't say his name, Rias. The words came sharp, explosive. Akeno's whole body tensed, her rage flaring up like a cat whose tail had just been stepped on. Rias went silent. Then, slowly, she nodded and let out a deep sigh. She'd crossed a line and she knew it. When it came to Akeno, she was out of answers. Her gaze wandered back to Akira. Perhaps, he was the only one who could reach her. The only one who might be able to heal that wound. Unaware of the heavy conversation happening nearby, Akira continued his spar with Konako. From his perspective, it was less of a battle and more like an enjoyable little game. Eventually, with a soft thud, they broke apart. That's enough for today, Konako-chan. You've got to know your limits. Okay. Konako nodded, wiping the sweat from her brow and breathing steadily. Thanks to her activated Yuki, her strength had improved immensely, especially in stamina and energy output. Senjutsu wasn't just physical combat, it was the art of syncing with the natural world. Drawing energy from the surroundings to empower the body and spirit. And for a born Nikomata like Konako, her talent was undeniable. Her affinity for Senjutsu was off the charts. She was still young, but someday once she hit her prime she would be unstoppable. Beside her, Akira gently patted her head, his fingers softly brushing through her hair like he was stroking a cat. Konako's cheeks turned a light shade of pink. But she didn't resist. In fact, she inched closer just a little. Ever since the day Akira helped her face the truth she'd been denying, her feelings for him had shot through the roof like a rocket into the sky. Now, in front of him, Konako was like a cuddly kitten quietly basking in his affection, never pulling away. And for Akira, petting her had become a kind of habit. A quiet ritual. Like therapy for both of them. Chapter 61, A Conversation Beneath the Moonlight. Chapter 60, A Conversation Beneath the Moonlight. Under the silent veil of night, Akira sat alone in the garden, letting the soft touch of moonlight soak into his skin. The world was still, quiet, only the rustle of leaves and the gentle breeze whispered around him. Then, soft footsteps broke the silence. He turned his head toward the sound and saw Rias Gremory walking toward him, clad in her sleepwear. Though her attire was casual, the loose fabric did nothing to hide her flawless figure. If anything, the faint outlines beneath the thin cloth only made her seem more alluring, like a living illusion brought to life under the moon. "It's late," she said, approaching him. "Why are you out here staring at the moon instead of sleeping?" "Well, that makes two of us, doesn't it?" Akira replied with a calm smile, gesturing to the seat beside him. Without hesitation, Rias took it. Their relationship was complicated, teetering somewhere between close friendship and something much deeper. Akira was clearly drawn to her body, while Rias had already gambled everything on him. With stakes that high, how could there not be some kind of emotion involved? "Coming to me this late at night," Akira said, eyes still on the moon. "You've got something on your mind, don't you?" "You really are annoying sometimes," Rias huffed lightly. "It's like you can read minds." "Not really. I just know the things I want to know." "That's exactly the kind of answer that pisses people off." "Oh? Didn't realize that." Rias let out a small huff. His words, his tone always had this way of getting under her skin. Whether it was his dry wit or that frustrating calmness, he made her want to hit him sometimes. "Enough joking around," she said. "You know about Akeno, right?" "I do," Akira replied flatly. "Konako was able to face herself because of you. Now it's Akeno's turn. I want you to help her too." "Hey? Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not some therapist. Besides, aren't they your peerage members? If I could handle this myself, do you think I'd be here asking you? Then, what's in it for me?" Rias took a slow breath, clearly trying to keep her cool. Seriously? After everything she'd done, trusting him, letting him help shape her path, even dealing with his infuriating attitude, he still had the nerve to ask what's in it for him? He didn't need to read her mind. Her expression said it all. "What now?" Akira asked, breaking the awkward silence. "It's still about Konako," Rias said quietly. "Now that she's embraced her powers, she's finally using her Nikomata abilities again. And that's thanks to you. But Akeno, she's still stuck." "You mean she has powers she's refusing to use too?" "Yet. Her father is Barakil, one of Grigori's top brass and wielder of the divine lightning. Akeno inherited the fallen angel's light-based powers, but she's always hated that part of herself." Akira leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You sure know how to pick your peerage. Every one of them is some kind of hidden monster." "I didn't exactly have a choice," she said with a sigh. "But yet, they're all exceptional. So, what should I do now?" Rias blinked at him, then without warning pouted. A real, proper pout. Akira blinked. For a moment, he was genuinely stunned. This side of Rias was unfairly cute. When he just stared at her in silence, a faint blush crept up her cheeks. She turned away quickly, clearly flustered. Hey, what are you staring at?" "Nothing. I'm just surprised. I didn't expect the president of the Occult Research Club to look so adorable." Adorable?" He chuckled. "Rias, maybe we should just skip everything and go straight to marriage. That way, Akeno and Konako would be mine by default." "I wouldn't mind. You're way better than Riser." "You're flattering me. I might start getting cocky." "Too bad. I don't see any signs of that happening," she muttered, turning away again. But her words weren't just banter. In the Gremory household, breaking off a political engagement was already walking a dangerous line. If her new partner ended up being a farce, it would be a stain on the Gremory name, a disgrace among the high-ranking devil nobility, where reputation was everything. That's why Rias had decided to risk it all on him. If she had to give herself to someone, she'd rather it be Akira than Riser Phoenix. "So," she asked softly, "will you help me?" "Of course. Leave it to me. What's your plan?" "A true expert always has his methods," he said casually. That answer made Rias twitch. This guy was so frustrating. But under the moonlight, with the night breeze gently brushing through Akira's long emerald hair, he looked mesmerizing. His elegance, his quiet presence, he didn't just look beautiful. It was like watching a painting come to life. In that moment, he could have passed as a moon goddess, not a man. And Rias couldn't help feeling a twinge of envy. If Akira just sat still, without speaking or moving, his aura could easily outshine even hers. It made her wonder, who really is this man? She'd tried investigating him lately, using every resource the Gremory name could pull. But there was nothing. Every lead came up empty. Her family's influence didn't reach far enough into the XXX region where Akira supposedly came from. The only known connection was his current place at Kuoh Academy, which had some ties to the Satrai family. Even when Rias confronted Sana Satrai directly, she got nothing. Sana claimed to know nothing. Shin Akira from top to bottom, the man was an enigma. "Oh right, Akeno came to me earlier," Rias said suddenly, her voice softer. "She wants me to make the first move, with you. She wants you to go first." Yet, in her mind, someone like her isn't worthy of being your first wife. Akira laughed, but his eyes flickered clearly, he was imagining something. Rias rolled her eyes. "Men. Always the same. Dreaming about harems the moment a chance shows itself. Akeno's been acting a little extreme lately. If you don't step in soon, things could get complicated." "Relax. It's nothing I can't handle." "Oh really? And how exactly do you plan to fix it?" He opened his mouth to repeat his earlier line, but the death glare from Rias, one that practically said "say it again and I'll kill you," made him stop short. "Simple," he said instead. "If she thinks she's not worthy of me, then I'll just make the first move. I'll act before she can run away. I'll give her no choice but to become worthy." "You're not planning on doing that, right?" She didn't finish her sentence, but the look on her face said it all. "And Akira?" He said nothing. Just smiled faintly, his silence saying more than words ever could. Chapter 62, The Awakening of Lightning and Light. Chapter 61, The Awakening of Lightning and Light. Not long after their conversation, Rias Gremory quietly returned to her room. Though she had spoken with him at length, she still hadn't gotten the answer she truly wanted. Once she was gone, Akira exhaled softly and turned his gaze toward the shadowed corner of the garden. "That's enough. How long were you planning to hide there?" he asked calmly, his tone devoid of surprise. From the darkness, a graceful figure stepped into the moonlight. "Hime-jima Akeno." Akira gave her a small, knowing smile. Of course, Rias had come here tonight without telling Akeno, hoping he could somehow help resolve her inner conflict. But as it turned out, Akeno had followed her from the start. She had overheard everything. The night was still. Their voices hadn't been particularly hushed. For someone like Akeno, no ordinary human, it had been easy to hear every word. "Is there something you want to say?" Akira asked. Akeno shook her head gently. "Not really." She had already guessed Rias's intentions. They had grown up together closer than sisters, and more familiar with each other than anyone else could be. "So then," Akira said again, "what will you do now?" "That question should be for you," she replied, her tone quiet but clear. "Didn't Rias leave this in your hands?" "Because you're the one at the heart of this," he answered easily. Akeno lowered her head, her expression uncertain. "I don't know." Her hatred toward her father, wasn't it just another form of love? Only deep affection can birth pain so profound, an anger that defies words. Deep inside, Akeno understood that the suffering and regret her father carried was far heavier than her own. The guilt of losing the woman he loved, the grief of watching that woman die to protect their daughter, and the heartbreak of being hated by the very child he treasured most, those emotions must have eaten away at him more than anything. "Akeno," Akira said softly, "there's something I've always wanted to ask. The mother you loved was killed by the Hime-jima clan. So why did your hatred fall on your father, instead of the ones truly responsible. Akeno fell silent. Of course, she hated them. But hatred alone wasn't enough. The Jima clan was one of Japan's 5 great Onmyuji clans. Its influence spread across the country like roots in soil. As she was now, merely a devil servant under the Gremory family, the idea of revenge was laughable. Besides, the Jima clan was human while Akeno stood with the devils. Her father, Barakil, was a high-ranking officer in Grigori, the organization of the fallen angels. If she acted recklessly, she could spark a war between humans and Grigori, and perhaps even drag the rest of the Onmyuji clans into it. The web of power in this world was too tangled to be unraveled by emotion alone. You and your father are still father and daughter, Akira said gently. That bond doesn't just vanish. And believe me, the pain he carries probably runs deeper than yours. In the end, he's just a powerless husband, and a grieving father. Akira. I'm not asking you to forgive everything. I know that's impossible. The rift between you two, only the two of you can mend it. Outsiders like me can't interfere. Akeno lowered her gaze again. Disappointment or perhaps emptiness flashed across her face. What she truly wanted deep down was a reason. A reason strong enough to forgive him. But that reason had never come. But Akeno, Akira said, his voice calm but sincere, the fallen angel blood in you is part of who you are. And honestly, I kind of like fallen angels. Especially you. You're a rare, beautiful blend of devil and fallen angel. A soft chuckle escaped her lips, though her eyes were distant. You say you like someone disgusting like me? That's a pretty weak reason, Akira-kun. Not at all, he said. I like you just as you are. I might be human, but I've always had a thing for non-human girls. Monster girls, fallen angels, devil women. I think they're all beautiful. You really are a weirdo, Akira-kun. So that's your taste. Got a problem with that? No. If anything, I think it makes you even more charming. Then, Akeno, for me would you be willing to try? She smiled, faint but genuine. That's a hard request to say no to, Akira-kun. That's just how I am, he said with a quiet grin. And under the moonlight, Akeno smiled a real one. Not her usual teasing, seductive smirk. But a warm, honest smile that bloomed from the depths of her heart. In that moment, a pair of wings unfolded from her back. One was a sleek, dark wing of a devil, calm, composed, regal. The other, a feathered black wing of a fallen angel tainted by sorrow, yet pure in its own way. She looked like an infernal queen, a temptress born from twilight itself. To have met you, Akira-kun, it's the greatest luck of my life, she said softly. Because we're alike. We both hide our real selves behind a perfect mask. But at that moment Akira felt something shift. Her voice. Her smile. Something felt off. There was a hint of something darker leaking from beneath the surface. A subtle obsession, slowly seeping out. Is this a Yandarum moment? Akira thought, brow twitching. Hey, don't go spreading weird labels. I'm a good guy, okay? Yufufu, that's such an Akira-kun thing to say. Since when did my name become synonymous with trouble, hey? He sighed, shaking his head slightly. It felt like he'd just caught a glimpse of Akeno's hidden side. People called it Mo cloaked in darkness, but with Akeno, it felt more like pure darkness wrapped in elegance. Then energy began to gather in her hands. In her left, golden bolts of lightning danced and sparked the power of divine lightning, inherited from her father. In her right, a brilliant white light began to glow, the sacred energy typically wielded by angels. Light energy was deadly poison to devils. But Akeno, with her fallen angel blood, was a rare exception. She could manipulate it freely. The two forces, lightning and light, clashed in her palms. And then, they merged. A radiant, crackling surge erupted between her hands. Holy lightning! A hybrid force that fused her father's divine lightning with the sacred power of angels. In that moment, Akeno had fully embraced the bloodline passed down from her father, unlocking the might of a true ultimate class fallen angel. Within her now flowed three bloodlines, the human blood of her mother, the fallen angel blood of her father, and the devil blood granted through reincarnation by the Gremory family. Though she had accepted her heritage, mastering the full power of a fallen angel would still take time. But one thing was certain, once she did, Jima Akeno would surpass many high-class devils. After all, she was the daughter of one of the most powerful fallen angels, Barakiel, wielder of divine lightning. Chapter 63, Passive? No way. I'll be the one taking the lead. Chapter 62, Passive? No way. I'll be the one taking the lead. After fully adjusting to the new power coursing through her, Jima Akeno slowly turned her sharp gaze toward Shin Akira. Her eyes burned with determination and a bold resolve that made Akira tense up without realizing it. He wasn't sure why, but his instincts were screaming Akeno was planning something unusual. As I thought, she said calmly, I just can't bring myself to hand you over to Rias that easily. Isn't that a little too sudden of a change? Wasn't it just a few days ago that you said the exact opposite? I haven't changed. All right then, if you say so. That's why I've made an important decision. What kind of decision? That I'll steal your first time, before Rias gets the chance. The moment those words left her lips, Akeno's nightgown slid gently to the floor. She was only 16, but her figure already surpassed that of most grown women, mature, curvaceous, and absolutely stunning. Especially in one particular department, her 102 cm bust even exceeded Rias Gremory's 99 cm. Although, to be fair, Rias had the edge in overall balance and elegance. Wait, aren't lines like that supposed to come from guys? Well, Akira-kun, it's because you never make a move. I've given you so many signals, and yet you've done nothing. So this time, I'll take the initiative. Hey! I didn't hear anything before he could react. Akeno, now down to her underwear, leapt into Akira's arms. His mind instantly went blank. This was insane. How did he, of all people, end up being pounced on? A man like him, getting overpowered like this, he couldn't let that slide. However, in the blink of an eye, the tide turned. Though Akeno had seemed in control at first, she now found herself cradled tightly in Akira's arms. Just when she thought the moment would stop like always, Akira lifted her up bridal style and walked confidently toward one of the nearby rooms. The mansion had many guest rooms, each well kept and spotless thanks to the staff, so there was no issue of cleanliness or comfort. Akira-kun, you're the one who started this, so don't blame me if I decide not to hold back. From now on, leave everything to me, Akeno. Of course. Everything I am, is yours. Her soft voice and warm breath mingled in the air between them. As the door closed gently behind them, Akira laid Akeno down on the bed. His gaze met her flushed face, not one of embarrassment, but a passionate longing that had been held back for far too long. Akira reached out and gently touched her cheek. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Their eyes said everything. It was Akeno who moved first, her fingers reaching up to his chest, slowly undoing the buttons of his shirt one by one, her hands trembling ever so slightly. Every motion was filled with emotion, as if she were engraving each moment into her memory. You're really handsome, Akira-kun, she whispered, almost as if afraid the words would vanish if she said them too loud. Akira responded with a kiss, deep, slow, and tender. Their lips met and moved in sync, unhurried yet intense. The air between them grew warmer, heavy with anticipation. Akeno let out a soft sound as Akira's kisses traveled from her lips to her neck and shoulder. Her skin tingled wherever he touched, her fingers clutching tightly at the sheets beneath her. Whimpers slipped from her mouth, light and filled with emotion. Akira! Their bodies pressed against each other without a single barrier. Every brush of skin sparked the fire they'd both been keeping inside for so long. No words were needed now, just quiet breaths and loving gazes. That night, they didn't just share a physical connection. They shared their hearts. In that still, silent room, time seemed to slow, granting space for the two of them to express their feelings completely. As the night deepened, the only sounds left were their breath and the steady rhythm of their hearts. And in the dark, Akeno held Akira's hand tightly, whispering with quiet sincerity, "Thank you, for choosing me." The night passed in silence, but for them, it marked a turning point, one they'd never forget. In that one night, a young girl was gone and in her place stood a grown woman. It had been a first time for both of them. At an age burning with passion and emotion, especially for someone like Akira whose body carried traces of dragon factor from the presence of boosted gear, the Red Dragon Emperor, such intensity was almost impossible to contain. Just like Hyudois say in the original story, Akira too needed to occasionally release that dragon energy to maintain physical and mental balance. If he wanted to, he could even form a direct contract with Drake and fully transform into a dragon. But so far, he wasn't ready to give up his humanity. As the morning sun filtered through the curtains, Akeno Himejima slowly opened her eyes. Her gaze fell upon the sleeping face beside her, and as she felt the lingering soreness in her body, a gentle smile formed on her lips. "Mother! I've finally found someone I can truly rely on." What she did last night, it was her way of letting go. Because deep down, a part of her still doubted whether Akira could really win the upcoming raiding game against Riser Phoenix and his entire peerage. He was planning to take them all on alone. If the worst were to happen, then at the very least, she wanted a memory she'd never regret. "You're smiling to yourself this early in the morning." Akira's voice drifted lazily from the side of the bed. Turns out he had been awake for a while, just pretending to sleep. "Did I wake you?" "Not really. I've been up, just didn't feel like moving." "Thank you, darling." Akeno beamed and gave him a gentle kiss on the cheek. Akira stayed quiet for a moment. Was this what being in love felt like? Even the morning air seemed sweet like honey. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Knock, knock. The two of them froze. This room was deep inside the mansion. No one was supposed to know they were here. SSSHH. Akeno tried to sit up, but the lingering soreness from last night stopped her. She groaned softly and fell back into the pillows. Akira gently hushed her and said, "Let me handle it. Just rest for today." Okay." Surrounded by his warmth, Akeno felt truly protected. Maybe this was what it meant to be cared for by a man. Akira quickly dressed and headed for the door. When he opened it, standing there was none other than Konako Tiju. "Pervert senpai. K Konako? Weren't you super sweet to me yesterday? Degenerate?" Her face was flushed red, but her words came out flat and merciless. Akira could only stare, speechless. How did my reputation crash this fast? "I brought clothes for Akeno-senpai. Buku asked me to deliver them." You guys knew she was here?" Akira regretted asking the moment the words left his mouth. There weren't many residents in this mansion. It wouldn't take a genius to figure it out. This morning, Buku found Akeno-senpai's nightgown lying in the garden. "I already knew you were a perv, but I didn't think you'd be this impatient." Her voice wasn't loud, but just clear enough to reach the room inside. Akeno's face turned crimson, all the way to her ears. She'd completely forgotten she had left her clothes in the garden last night. And now, everyone knew. "Ugh! Konako-chan, it's not what you think. We didn't. I mean, not that quickly. Pervert senpai, I never said anything. You're the one who brought it up." Konako handed the clothes to Akira and turned to leave without another word. But as she walked away, her expression darkened. She glanced down at her small frame and muttered to herself in silence, compared to Akeno-senpai. "I'm still so far behind." Meanwhile, Akira stepped back into the room, clothes in hand. On the bed, Akeno had buried herself under the covers, too embarrassed to come out. Chapter 64, A Conversation Between Two Girls. Chapter 63, A Conversation Between Two Girls. Today, Akeno Himejima had to skip her usual training session. As a result, the role of Asia Argento's teacher temporarily fell to Rias Gremory. But with that shift came an unintended consequence. Almost everyone in the house, even the ever-innocent Asia, had caught on to the fact that something had happened between Akeno and Akira. Something deep. Intimate. It wasn't exactly subtle. Early that morning, someone had found a woman's nightwear lying carelessly in the garden. At the same time, both Akeno and Akira were missing from their own rooms. Instead, they were discovered in the guest room closest to that very garden. Even the most oblivious person could connect the dots. That night, Rias finally paid Akeno a visit. Her steps were casual, her expression unreadable, but it was clear from her eyes that she already knew everything. As for Akira, he'd been chased off ahead of time, giving the girls some space to have their little heart-to-heart. "You really went all in, didn't you, Akeno?" "Oh? Did you come here just to tease me, Rias?" "Not at all. I came to congratulate you. After all, my dearest friend has finally found someone to lean on." "Then I'll accept your congratulations, graciously." Rias wore a strange, almost mischievous smile. Akeno sighed, already knowing she had no way to deny it. She had no one to blame but herself. After all, she was the one who'd offered herself so freely last night. Just the day before, she had said she wasn't worthy, had even suggested that Rias should be the one to pursue Akira. But then, before the words even had time to cool, she'd taken the leap first. Rias hadn't expected it either. She had approached Akira the previous night for help, but when she left, Akeno had stepped in, and wrapped everything up in one night. When morning came and Rias spotted Akeno's nightwear abandoned in the same place she and Akira had spoken the night before, she couldn't help but think, wait, did they actually do it in the garden? Thankfully, after confirming there were no suspicious traces left behind, she breathed a sigh of relief. Still, realizing that her best friend had gone from maiden to woman in the span of one night was a lot to process. Akeno. About last night, did it hurt? Like, a lot. The question caught Akeno completely off guard. Her face turned red in an instant. It was far too personal. If you're that curious, why not try it yourself? Don't be ridiculous. I'm still officially engaged to Riser. If I lost my virginity before the engagement's called off, it would tarnish the Gremory name. Then why even ask? I was just curious. The mates back home talk about it sometimes. They say the first time is always painful. The mates? Who exactly are they serving? Surtsk-sama? Or maybe Zydicus-sama? Yeah? That's not the point. The topic had suddenly veered into dangerous territory. In the underworld, maids were often considered personal property of the household. Serving their masters in every sense of the word was part of the job. But in the Gremory household, the only men that title could apply to were Surtsk's and Rias's father, Zydicus. Which meant Rias had, without meaning to, dragged her own father and brother into a very inappropriate conversation. No, I think that is the point. Don't tell me. Lady Grafia and Lady Venelana can't satisfy them anymore. Don't say another word, Akeno. We're dropping this topic right now. Rias practically jumped in panic. She knew that if this line of conversation went too far, they might end up unleashing a scandal of epic proportions. Especially in the Gremory family, where women often held more authority than the men. Her father, Zydicus Gremory, might hold the official title of head of the house, but her mother Venelana, a daughter of the prestigious Bale clan, had far more influence and political power. And while Zydicus wasn't exactly a henpecked husband, it was clear that most major decisions passed through his wife first. If Venelana ever found out that Zydicus had been involved with any of the housemaids, Well, that man wouldn't make it out in one piece. Surtsks, on the other hand, was harder to pin down. Technically, Grafia was still classified as a maid, but in practice, she was both his wife and queen. Everything he did was under her strict supervision. If there was ever a scandal, it wouldn't be the media that buried him, it would be the Silver Queen herself. Watching Rias pale with each passing second, Akeno couldn't help but laugh. It seemed she'd stumbled upon a dangerous little secret, one she could playfully hold over Rias's head in the future. Still, if she had to guess, Akeno felt that Zodiakus-sama was the more likely culprit. Surtsks had always been the model of loyalty, while her father had once been something of a playboy, even by devil standards. Seeing Rias curled up on the sofa, clearly regretting ever bringing this up, Akeno felt oddly satisfied. Apparently, teasing your best friend was just as fun as tormenting enemies. Maybe that was a dangerous path she needed to watch out for. Still, it was all in good fun. Just two girls joking around. By the way, Akeno, have you really come to terms with everything now? The question wiped the grin from Akeno's face. She paused for a moment, then gave a slow, honest nod. Her expression was calm, no longer haunted by the darkness that used to shadow her features. It's not easy, accepting everything. But I've learned to see it from a different perspective. I didn't accept the fallen angel blood inside me because I forgave that man. I accepted it because the one I love accepted me completely. That's all. Because he accepted you, hey. Yet. That sounds like you. Akeno was the daughter of a shrine maiden and had inherited her mother's lineage as an onmyuji. Sacrifice was in her blood. She had always been ready to give everything for those she cared about. I guess, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Not at all. Honestly, I'm really happy for you, Akeno. Thanks. Their words came from different places, but somehow, they both reached the same destination. As two girls who understood each other better than anyone else, they didn't need to say much. Sometimes, silence said more than words ever could. This pre-war training period hadn't just strengthened their powers, it had prepared their hearts as well. Both Akeno Himejima and Konako Tujao had managed to break free from their inner chains. And most importantly, their strength had grown dramatically. Chapter 65, The day before the rating game. Chapter 64. The day before the rating game. A week had passed. Not too short, but not quite long either. Day by day, time moved forward until finally, the day before the long-awaited rating game arrived. With the special training period officially over, everyone had returned to Kuoh Academy. Though it wasn't formally recognized, Akira's private villa had now become the unofficial second headquarters of the Occult Research Club. Other than Chiba Ueto, who still stayed at the school dorms, every other member had chosen their own rooms within the villa. Akeno Himejima had even handed out duplicate keys to everyone. Naturally, with her newfound intimacy with Akira, Akeno had taken up the role of the lady of the house without anyone needing to say it out loud. Name, Shin Akira. Identity, transfer student at Kuoh Academy. Rank, level 6, ultimate class devil. Template, Enkidu, 63%, Noble Phantasm, Chains of Heaven. Talent, Consummated Shape, Beast King Instinct, Body Transformation Skills, Blue Lightning Light, Aura Detection, The Wisdom of the People. Equipment, Boosted Gear, Red Dragon Emperor. Items, during their training days up in the mountains, while the primary focus had been on refining technique and team coordination. Akira had also taken the liberty of hunting down several stray devils that had wandered too close to the training grounds. The result? His Enkidu inheritance template rose to 63%. And that number alone made him feel like tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. According to the intel Rias had provided, the enemy team was composed of Riser Phoenix, a high-class devil; Ubelina, a mid-class devil and Riser's queen; Ravel Phoenix, Riser's little sister and another mid-class devil. 13 other members, all classified as low-class devils. While the pawns couldn't be dismissed outright, their threat level was minimal. Assuming a percentage conversion of inherited value from their defeat, 13% from the pawns, 3% each from Muebelina and Ravel, and 5% from Riser himself. That would total around 24%. If added to Akira's current 63%, he'd hit 87%, more than enough to push past the threshold into Mu class power. And once he crossed that boundary, things would change completely. The difference between those below and above that line wasn't just numerical, it was an entirely different realm of power. Man! I can already feel it. Tomorrow's match might just change everything. Just thinking about the possibility of ascending into Mu class made his heart race with anticipation. At that moment, the door to his room creaked open quietly. Akeno Jima stepped inside, wearing a light nightgown. These days, the two of them shared a room naturally. After all they had gone through together, there was no longer any reason to hesitate. Akeno had chosen Akira completely, without reserve. Their relationship now had the soft warmth of a honeymoon phase. They were almost never apart. And as a man, Akira had no reason to complain about having such a beautiful woman glued to his side. "What's on your mind, darling?" "Nothing much. Just thinking about tomorrow's match. The rating game, hey? I believe in you. You'll win, and set Rias free from that engagement, right?" "Of course. I'd never betray the trust of my wife." Wife. "Honestly, you say things like that so easily." Akeno gave him a light smack on the chest, her cheeks tinged with a rosy hue. Still, the happiness on her face was unmistakable. Tonight, unlike previous nights, she didn't try to tease him or tempt him into anything. Ever since crossing that boundary in their relationship, both Akira and Akeno had been swept into an unending spiral of closeness. But tonight was different. Tomorrow would be a decisive battle, and without needing to say much, the two had agreed to show restraint. Elsewhere, the underworld Phoenix household, tomorrow is the rating game. Are you prepared? The head of the Phoenix family sat in the central seat of the grand meeting room, his eyes calm but heavy with pressure as he addressed his son. "Relax, father. My opponent is just a human. Even with a sacred gear, the outcome is obvious. Victory is mine." Riser Phoenix answered confidently, with neither hesitation nor respect for the threat that was Shin Akira or Rias's team. He'd participated in countless rating games against adult devils. Facing off against Rias, a girl newly risen to the status of a full-fledged devil, didn't intimidate him at all. Especially since he already knew the composition of her peerage. In his eyes, they were a group of nobodies. "Good. You must win tomorrow. Rias may be young, but her potential is immense. Once you marry her, your mother will take over her proper education." "Understood, father." The family head nodded. He had always pampered his third son. After the eldest son brought glory and prestige to the family, the pressure on Riser had lessened. Instead, he was given more freedom, more indulgence. Back during the political reshuffling for the new four great Satans, the Gremory family had offered Rias's engagement as part of their bargaining chip to gain the Phoenix family's support for Xerxes' rise to the position of Lucifer. In return, the Phoenix family reaped many benefits from that alliance, both political and economic. And with Xerxes now firmly established as Mu, their connection to the Gremorys gave them added prestige and protection. Now, if Riser were to officially marry Rias Gremory, the Phoenix family's position would rise even higher, placing them closer to the inner circle of the Mu faction. One son had already carried their name into glory. The other would wed into bloodline royalty. If children were born from this union, they would carry the blood of a Mu. Everything was falling into place almost too perfectly. That is, except for one small detail, Rias Gremory absolutely rejected the marriage. To the point that she invoked an official challenge through a rating game. And beyond that, she'd even taken in a human as both protector and romantic interest. Their investigations confirmed that she hadn't been physically intimate with him yet. But the fact that she chose a mere human over Riser? That alone was a slap across the Phoenix family's face. It was beyond unacceptable. To make matters worse, Surtsk's Lucifer himself had approved the raiding game as if brushing aside the old engagement agreement like it meant nothing. To the head of House Phoenix, that was nothing short of betrayal. Once, Surtsk's had needed their support to rise to power. Now that he stood tall as a Mu, was he simply planning to discard their alliance? No self-respecting noble could tolerate such arrogance. And besides, even if the Phoenix family had already received their share of rewards, greed was only natural. If you can take more, why stop now? Chapter 66, The Long-Awaited Day. Chapter 65. The long-awaited day. Though it wasn't a national holiday, Kuoh Academy had suddenly cancelled all classes for the day. Not that the students were surprised. Sudden, unexplained school closures had become something of a regular occurrence, so common, in fact, that most of them didn't even question it anymore. The reason this time was simple. Today was the day of the raiding game. Although the match wouldn't take place on school grounds, but rather in a specially prepared dimensional space designed to prevent any damage to the real world, precautionary measures were still necessary. That's why Sana Shidori, or rather, Sana Satrai, along with the rest of the student council, had been placed on high alert, ready to respond in case anything unexpected happened. Inside the Occult Research Club room, the atmosphere was tense and quiet. Everyone was preparing. The moment the time came, they would be transported to the battlefield through large-scale magic teleportation. But just as the pressure reached its peak, the silence was broken by the sound of steady footsteps echoing in the hallway. Tap! 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 Sana Satrai entered the room, flanked by her queen, Tsubaki Shinra. "Well, this is a surprise," said Rias Gremory, greeting her friend with a polite nod. "Didn't expect to see you here, Sana. I came to check on you, Rias. How are you feeling? Confident?" "Of course," Rias replied with a calm smile. "I've got an unbeatable trump card." As she spoke, her gaze drifted toward the sofa where Shin Akira was lounging comfortably. He sat with Konako Tajao curled up on his lap, calmly feeding her sweets, while Akeno Himejima poured him a cup of tea like a graceful host. The whole scene looked less like people preparing for an intense, high-stakes battle and more like a group of friends getting ready for a spring picnic. "It's been a while, Shin Akira-kun," Sana said as she stepped forward. "Nice to see you again, Sanakai-ku," Akira replied casually, not bothering to shift from his relaxed position. Since their last meeting when Akira rejected her invitation to join her peerage, the two hadn't spoken again. Though from what he'd heard, Sana had recently reincarnated a human into her peerage, and had used 4 whole pawns to do so. Naturally, Akira understood she was referring to Saji Gen Shiro. "You seem quite sure of yourself, going up against the third son of the Phoenix family. He's just a walking fire turkey. There won't be any surprises. You've gotten cockier since the last time we talked." Sana's voice was cool, her eyes narrowing slightly. She couldn't help but feel a little relieved that Akira had turned down her offer back then. Sure, having a strong subordinate was valuable, but someone this arrogant could easily become a liability. After all, even if Riser Phoenix had a terrible personality, he was still a high-class devil from a prestigious household, and a veteran of many raiding games. His immortality, granted by the Phoenix lineage, made him a nightmare to deal with. Yet Akira was acting as if victory was a foregone conclusion. Even if he was stronger, overconfidence like this was a ticking time bomb. Unbeknownst to Akira, his impression in Sana's mind had dropped several notches. Though honestly, even if he had known, he probably wouldn't have cared. The opinions of others weren't exactly a priority to him. "Senpai is strong," Konako suddenly spoke up from his lap, her gaze fixed on Sana. Sana fell silent. The brief words from the quiet Nikomata caught her off guard. When she turned toward Rias, she noticed something had changed. Her friend no longer carried the usual pressure or tension. In fact, she looked completely composed, even serene. Was it possible? Could this man really be that powerful? Sana knew that Akira had reached the high-class rank. But ranks in the underworld weren't everything, especially when you factored in the influence of noble bloodlines, like the Phoenix family's infamous Phoenix regeneration. Rias hadn't fully mastered her family's power of destruction, and even Sana herself didn't know how she'd deal with Riser's absurd regeneration if it came down to it. So then, did Akira have a way to counter it? Ding! 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 A soft chime rang out from a magic device in the room, signaling that the time had come. The game was about to begin. Rias, Sana said softly, I'll be watching from the outside. Free yourself from the chains that bind you. Her words weren't just advice. As a rival and a friend, they were also a sign of respect from one team leader to another. But Rias simply shook her head with a gentle smile. No. Today's raiding game isn't my stage. She turned her eyes toward Akira, still lounging like he didn't have a care in the world. It's his. What do you mean by that, Rias? Sana asked, her curiosity piqued. But Rias didn't answer. She simply said one last thing, we'll talk again later, Sana. In that instant, a massive teleportation circle lit up beneath the members of the Occult Research Club. A surge of magic pulsed through the air, and in the blink of an eye, they vanished in a wave of glowing light, leaving only Sana and Tsubaki behind. Tsubaki. What did Rias mean by that? It seems she was implying that, in this match, Shin Akira will be the only one fighting. Unbelievable. She's betting everything on a human. Or maybe, there's something we still don't know. Sana couldn't hide her shock. Rias, usually so calculating and composed, had made a move that bordered on reckless. But before they could analyze further, another magic circle activated beneath them. A crystal blue light enveloped Sana and Tsubaki, whisking them away to the venue. Raiding game dimensional arena neutral territory, underworld. Sana and Tsubaki arrived at the expansive battlefield prepared for the raiding game. The space was massive, an artificial dimension, stabilized with countless layers of magic. All around them, the arena was filled with powerful high-class devils. They hadn't come merely to spectate, they were here to witness what was, in truth, a significant political event. The younger sister of the Mole Lucifer, rebelling against an arranged marriage, and seeking to annul it through formal means via a publicly sanctioned raiding game. This wasn't just some teenage drama. It was a high-stakes battle between two noble houses. On one side stood Rias Gremory, heir to the Gremory household, younger sister of Surtsk's Lucifer, and the only daughter of one of the four great devil clans. On the other stood Riser Phoenix, third son of the ancient Phoenix family, infamous for their regeneration and nobility. Seated at the highest podium were the key figures of the underworld. Surtsk's Lucifer himself had come to personally witness the outcome. Beside him was the head of the Phoenix household, here to see whether his son would truly marry into the Gremory line. Above the arena, giant magical screens projected the images of both teams, Team Rias and Team Riser. Magic cameras hovered around the battlefield, ready to broadcast every move in real time. A gentle breeze swept through the air. From above, a shimmering magic circle descended, glowing softly with silver light. From it emerged an elegant figure, Graphia Lucifuge, the legendary queen of the underworld, wife of Lucifer, and arbiter for today's match. The raiding game was about to begin. Chapter 67, The Raiding Game begins. Chapter 66, The Raiding Game begins. The moment Graphia Lucifuge appeared, the entire arena fell into absolute silence. As the strongest queen in the underworld and the personal envoy of Lucifer, her presence alone signaled that this raiding game was no mere formality, it was now an officially sanctioned, high-level event. With the Mu themselves attending as witnesses, no one dared to speak out of turn or behave carelessly. Meanwhile, within the artificial dimension designated as the battlefield, Shin Akira stood in the center of what looked like Kuoh Academy's schoolyard, quietly surveying his surroundings with mild surprise. So this is an artificial dimension. Incredible, Akira murmured. Despite the ominous red haze clouding the skies, the entire place was almost indistinguishable from the real academy grounds. Everything had been recreated with astounding precision. Still, there was one thing that bothered him. He could feel that his power was being slightly suppressed in this space. The dimensional field had been specially constructed as a safe battleground. But its floating, platform-like structure meant there was no direct connection to real Earth. And without that grounding, Akira couldn't draw energy from the planet as he usually did. Even so, it wasn't something that would stop him. Against Riser Phoenix, he didn't need his full power. Victory was already a foregone conclusion. "Bucku, why are we still here?" asked Asia Argento, tilting her head with visible confusion. To her, the room felt too familiar, identical, in fact, to the occult research club they used every day. Indeed, the space had been magically reconstructed to perfectly mimic the real Kuoh Academy. Every desk, every wall, even the furniture was reproduced down to the smallest detail through large-scale formation magic. "This is an artificial dimension, Asia," Rias explained gently. "It's designed to look like the school, so we can fight in an environment we're comfortable in." So it's fake? But why go through all that trouble?" she asked, even more puzzled. "Because this is the place we know best," Akeno answered with her usual serene smile. "Also, I wouldn't be surprised if the Gremory family helped influence the design a little." It was true. While technically neutral, the arena had been arranged by the Gremory household. It wasn't unusual for the hosting side to receive some minor advantages. "Amazing!" Asia breathed, her eyes sparkling as she gazed around in awe. But all eyes soon returned to a single person, Shin Akira. Everyone knew it. This match rested entirely on his shoulders. "Akira, are you really confident you can win?" Rias asked softly. Though she had voiced her trust in him, the closer they got to the start, the more anxious she became. "Don't worry," he said, stretching lazily. "This'll be over quicker than you think. Then I'll be waiting to hear the good news. This isn't a match. It's a hunt. And I'm the only hunter here. The rest are just prey." His voice held absolute certainty. But since most of his teammates had never seen the full extent of his power, the tension remained thick in the air. Elsewhere in the artificial dimension, in another area modeled after Kuoh Academy, Riser Phoenix arrived with his full team, 14 pieces in total. Riser strutted into the space with a proud smirk, arrogance radiating from every step. As a pure-blooded devil from a noble family, Riser had grown up drenched in superiority. To him, this battlefield designed to resemble a human school was beneath him. A disgrace, even. He could never understand why someone like Rias Gremory, the younger sister of Amu, would lower herself to attend a school in the human world. He didn't know, of course, that the only reason she had come to the human realm was to escape him. Back in the underworld, their families had been closely interacting, tied together by a political engagement. And so, Rias had fled. This world, this ordinary, peaceful place was her sanctuary. "So, the day's finally here," Riser muttered, eyes narrowing. "I'll make that human understand how worthless he really is." None of his peerage objected. In fact, they shared his disdain. Riser had already proven himself through numerous rating games. He had the skill, the pedigree, and the ego to match. "To be honest, Unii-sama, you really do like Rias, don't you?" a cold, sharp voice said behind him. "Ravel." Riser turned with a slight scowl. "What are you talking about? Your precious fiancé is getting cozy with a human. What's the point of bringing someone like that into our family?" Ravel Phoenix, Riser's little sister and the spoiled jewel of the Phoenix household, was even more arrogant than her brother. Coddled by her entire family, she had never known rejection or failure. "This is father's will." "The family agreed," Riser replied with slight irritation in his voice. Father only cares about the social advantage. If she weren't Surtsk's Lucifer's sister, who would even want to marry someone openly clinging to another man? I don't have a choice. She's the Mu's sister. Then crush her little boyfriend. Drag her back to the manor, and let mother teach her how to act like a proper wife for the Fenix household. That's been my plan from the start, Riser said with a smug grin. As a man, there was no way he could accept this insult not just as her fiancé, but as a noble of the underworld. Letting her be claimed by a human? That was a disgrace. One that could never be forgiven. All participants have arrived, Graphia's voice echoed clearly throughout the arena and across the battlefield. Therefore, I now officially declare the start of the rating game between Rias Gremory and Riser Fenix. I, Graphia Lucifuge, will serve as the referee for this match. Her voice was firm and unwavering, declaring to everyone that there would be no bias, no interference, and no escape from the rules. Back on Rias's side, the announcement brought a faint smile to Akira's lips. Finally. I was starting to get bored. He stood up calmly and made his way toward the door, stepping out of the replica clubroom with composed steps. No one followed him. Not a single member of Rias's team moved. Up in the audience stands, Sana Satri's eyes widened in disbelief. She had expected Akira to take center stage in the match, but she never imagined he would literally be the only one fighting. Rias, what were you thinking? Sana whispered, stunned. Is that man really so strong, that no one else is even needed? From where she stood, it looked like madness. And she wasn't alone in that thought. Even Graphia Lucifuge, usually cool and composed, couldn't entirely hide her unease. As much as she respected and even liked this potential future brother-in-law, facing Riser and his entire team alone seemed dangerously reckless. But the stage had been set. There was no turning back now. Author's note, at last. We've reached this turning point. Thank you so much to all of you who have followed the journey up to this chapter. I may not be a professional translator, but I'll keep doing my best to bring this story to life. I can't promise huge batch updates every day, but from now on, I'll be posting at least 2 chapters a day over on Patreon. And I promise I won't stop until the very end. This novel will not be abandoned, and the translation will be finished. No matter how long it takes. Thank you to everyone, whether you've supported me financially, or simply by being here and reading. Your presence means the world. Let's keep going together until the very end. Chapter 68, Time for the Slaughter. Chapter 67, Time for the Slaughter. Today, perhaps to embody the essence of Enkidu more deeply, Shin Akira had set aside his usual attire. He wore a simple white robe, flowing and loose, and walked barefoot, completely mirroring the legendary figure from the Fate series. And despite the artificial ground beneath him, not a speck of dirt touched his feet. They remained pristine and pale, as though untouched by the world itself. His presence was ethereal, serene, yet untouchable. Akira had fully activated one of the most powerful abilities he'd inherited from the Enkidu template, aura detection, ranked A and in the Fate system. A refined and high-tier perception skill that allowed him to detect the presence of enemies with extreme precision. At close range, it could even override stealth abilities like presence concealment, unless ranked higher. Now, standing within the fabricated space of the rating game, Akira let that awareness unfurl completely like a mental net spread across the arena. In mere moments, he'd pinpointed the positions of Riser Fenix and his reincarnated devil peerage. Unlike Akira, who moved alone, Riser's forces had split into smaller units, a standard tactical formation. After all, rating games weren't just about one-on-one fights. Strategy, deception, and battlefield manipulation were all part of the game's appeal. All right, Akira murmured softly to himself. Let's start with this group. His body slowly lifted off the ground, then accelerated, cutting through the air like a silver streak toward the stadium sector. His goal was simple: eliminate everyone before they could interfere. If any of them escaped and reached Rias, it could compromise the match. He couldn't afford delays. Flight, of course, was much faster than walking. In mere seconds, Akira touched down in the open-air arena. And waiting for him, was a welcoming party. "So, you're the arrogant human everyone's been talking about," a girl sneered from across the field. "I'm Isabella, my master's favorite pawn, and I'll make sure your journey ends here." "I'm Shuria. One of my master's pawns as well." "Marion, also a pawn." "Bulant. Loyal servant of Lord Riser." A total of 4. 1 rook, and 3 pawns, all reincarnated devils. 3 were scantily dressed women decorated in ribbons, and the last was a tall man in a butler uniform. Akira stared at them with a calm, unreadable gaze. Inwardly, he sighed. "Riser Fenix, you're underestimating this match." Even low-ranked peerage members had strategic value in the devil reincarnation system. And yet, Riser was sending them forward like disposable pieces. As if his subordinates were nothing more than toys. "Shin Akira. A mere human," he said plainly. "And now, it's your turn, to disappear." Without warning, golden magic circles flared into existence behind him. In the blink of an eye, heavenly chains, Enkidu's chains of heaven, shot forth through the air like divine lances. The golden radiance illuminated the stadium, then pierced through all 4 devils before they could react. It was over in an instant. There was no defense. No time to scream. They were erased before they could even draw breath for a counterattack. But thanks to the rating game system, their bodies were immediately teleported out once fatal injuries registered. No lives were truly lost, but Akira had never intended to go easy. His aim was pure elimination from the start. Ding! 4% template transmission inherited. A soft chime rang within him, another increment added to his soul's evolution. Akira smiled faintly. The hunt had officially begun. 1 rook and 3 pawns from Riser Fenix's peerage have been eliminated. The clear, commanding voice of Grafia Lucifuge echoed across the arena, reaching both the battlefield and the audience alike. The spectators, composed of high-class devils, nobles, and even Mua, began murmuring in hushed awe. "So that's the human chosen by Lady Rias. Chains? That's a sacred gear I've never seen before. 4 eliminated in 1 strike. They may be low tier, but still, that's impressive. As expected of the sister of Lucifer. She wouldn't choose just any human. A sacred gear like that. Could it be divine class?" In moments, the stadium was filled with whispers. Eliminating 4 devils in 1 attack was something only a high-class devil could achieve. It wasn't something a mid-level being could pull off. Still, up in the VIP seats, the patriarch of the Fenix clan remained impassive, his face unreadable. To him, only Eubelina, Riser's queen, and Ravel, his daughter, were worth serious attention. The others, pawns, knights, even rooks, were inconsequential ornaments. So when Akira wiped them out instantly, he didn't bat an eye. If anything, had Akira struggled with them, he might have reconsidered his approval of this match. Perhaps even retracted his family's blessing. A weak candidate was not worthy of House Gremory, let alone Fenix. 4, just like that. Akeno muttered from the Occult Research Club room. Back on Rias's side, the entire peerage had heard Grafia's announcement. Joy lit up their faces. He'd moved. And so far, the enemy hadn't even scratched him. But not everyone was pleased. Deep in another sector, Riser Fenix clenched his teeth in fury as Grafia's words echoed. He had always known his lower pieces were no match for stronger enemies. Still, they were his. They were part of his pride. And now they were gone, just like that. Useless trash, he snarled. How could they lose that fast? Relax, Unii-sama, Ravel Fenix said coolly, folding her arms with a mocking smirk. They were nothing but weak pawns. They were never your match to begin with. True, Riser growled, his jaw tight. Just disposable pieces. But for that human to humiliate me like this, I'll pay him back 100-fold. Of course. The honor of House Fenix cannot be tarnished. Riser stood. His gaze sharpened. I'm done waiting. I'll go myself. He had made up his mind to charge directly toward Rias. But just before he could take a single step, Graphia's voice rang out once more. 1 rook, 1 knight, and 2 pawns from Riser Fenix's team have been eliminated. The room fell quiet for a moment. 4 more gone. This time, they included a knight and another rook far more valuable than simple pawns. And once again, the executioner was Akira, wielding the chains of heaven with divine precision and brutal elegance. Ding! 4% template transmission inherited. Another surge of power flowed through him. With this, Akira's strength jumped up again from the mid-tier of the ultimate class devil level, to the very cusp of the top. His current synchronization sat at 71%. Not quite enough. But close. This confirmed his theory, it wasn't 70%, but 80% that marked the next threshold, his true evolution. Still, there were plenty of targets left on the battlefield. And by the end of this day, Shin Akira would reach even higher. With quiet resolve burning in his chest, he continued his advance deeper into enemy lines. The hunt had only just begun. Chapter 69, Noble Phantasm Release, True Name Liberation. Chapter 68, Noble Phantasm Release, True Name Liberation. 1 knight, 1 bishop, and 3 pawns from Riser Fenix's team have been eliminated. The sharp, commanding voice of Graphia Lucifuge once again echoed across the battlefield. With that announcement, all of Riser's deployed peerage members had been systematically removed from the raiding game. Now, only Riser himself, his queen Eubelina, and his little sister Ravela Bishop remained on the field. Everyone else was gone. Standing in the middle of the field, Riser Fenix looked like a powder keg ready to explode. From the moment he was born into noble prestige, he had never experienced humiliation like this. The match wasn't even halfway through and yet, every single one of his peerage had already been forced out. It wasn't just Riser who stood in shock. Even the high-class devils in the spectator stands stared in disbelief. They had witnessed it firsthand. Akira hadn't just defeated them, he erased them. Not a single one had withstood more than a single blow. The brief gaps between eliminations were merely the time it took Akira to move from one area to another. And in that short window since the match began, all 13 of Riser's peerage had been wiped out. Rias Gremory, and that human. You're deliberately provoking me, aren't you? Riser growled. Good. You've succeeded. But now prepare to pay the price. His face twisted in anger. His skin looked pale and tight, almost cracking under the pressure of his own fury. He could already see how this would spread across the underworld, how it would be recorded, whispered, and mocked. A pure-blooded devil like me, a veteran of multiple raiding games, and I let 13 pieces get eliminated by a human? Even if he won in the end, the stain on his pride would never be erased. And worse, his opponent was Rias, a devil who hadn't even completed her full peerage yet. Even victory here wouldn't cleanse the disgrace. Been a while, fire chicken. The voice came lazily from above. Riser's head snapped up. There he was, Shin Akira, floating in the sky, cloaked in his white robe, long emerald green hair swaying with the wind. Calm eyes stared down from above with piercing detachment. You, human. You've got some nerve showing your face in front of me. Hey? Did you say something, turkey? Akira chuckled. I even saved you for last. You should feel honored, you know. You bastard. With a roar, Riser summoned flames to his palms and hurled a blazing fireball the size of a basin straight at Akira. But the chains of heaven, those divine, golden chains circling around Akira, sprang into action. They intercepted the flames mid-air, slicing through them effortlessly and forming a radiant shield around him, like a golden barrier of celestial light. Riser narrowed his eyes. Cocky as he wasn't stupid. That sacred gear, no, that noble phantasm, it's trouble. Akira turned his gaze toward the two still standing behind Riser, Eubelina and Ravel. Still 2 left, hey? Guess it's your turn to leave the stage. Yubelina instantly stepped forward, shielding Ravel with her body. As Riser's queen and his most loyal servant, she understood better than anyone the importance of protecting Ravel. She wasn't just another piece. She was a phoenix, Riser's blood sister. Harming her would be unforgivable. Akira launched his chains again. Magic clashed. Explosive sparks lit the battlefield. Yubelina unleashed her signature magic, massive explosions that tore through the ground. For a moment, she stalled the golden chains. A minor miracle. But it wasn't enough. Moments later, a soft splatter echoed as blood dripped onto the ground. Akira raised a brow. Hey! You actually blocked it. Impressive. His smile deepened. But not enough. She was strong, yes, but not strong enough to handle the full might of an ultimate-class devil at the peak of his power. Yubelina. Are you okay? Ravel gasped as she saw her brother's queen take a hit to the shoulder, blood staining her elegant dress. Even though she had acted to protect her, Ravel had never expected her to get hurt. Despite her usual noble demeanor, Ravel wasn't the kind of aristocrat who looked down on her servants. Seeing Yubelina injured because of her shook her. I'm fine, Lady Ravel, Yubelina said, steadying herself with a hand on her chest. As long as you're safe, it's enough. Thank you. I'm okay, really. But the moment Riser saw blood, his blood, shed through his queen, it tipped him over the edge. You filthy human! You dare harm my queen and aim for my sister. You're dead. Akira shrugged, almost amused. Dude, this is a raiding game. Sure, it's called a game, but it's still a battlefield. I'll burn you alive. Riser exploded literally. Wings of fire burst from his back, massive and blinding. A colossal phoenix form blazed into existence behind him, its heat distorting the air and turning the sky above into a burning orange twilight. Meanwhile, Akira raised his hand to the heavens. Blue lightning light thunderclap dragon. A silver-white dragon made entirely of pure lightning emerged in a flash, its roar splitting the air like a divine war cry. Static electricity crackled across the battlefield as the beast coiled in the sky beside Akira. Flames versus lightning. The sky was divided. On one side, roaring fire. On the other, seething storm clouds, glowing with electrical fury. Die! Riser's phoenix screeched, wings wide, and soared into the sky. Each flap sent waves of searing heat through the air, threatening to scorch the very sky itself. On the other side, the thunder dragon roared back a sound that shook the heavens, echoing like the wrath of a god. Then they collided. The shockwave that followed tore through the sky like a cosmic quake. The arena trembled. Riser stared, wide-eyed. What is this magic? This level of power, from a human? Akira floated calmly above, hair fluttering in the aftermath of the explosion. And that wasn't even his full strength. Oh Ani-sama! Ravel's voice cracked from behind Riser. But before she could say another word, her body froze. She and Yubelina both looked down. Chains. Golden chains had pierced through them, seamless, invisible until the moment they struck. Then in a flash of light, they vanished, teleported out by the raiding game's protective system. One queen and one bishop from Riser Phoenix's team have been eliminated. Graphia's voice cut through the stunned silence. The audience could hardly believe it. Every single member of Riser Phoenix's peerage had been eliminated. By one man. Shin Akira. Up in the air, Akira allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Ding! 6% template transmission inherited. Ding! Congratulations! Host has acquired, skill Noble Phantasm release, true name Liberation. The real fight was about to begin. Chapter 70, Riser brought to his knees. Chapter 69, Riser brought to his knees. A terrifying surge of magical energy erupted from Akira's slim frame, one that, up until now, seemed anything but threatening. But now, that same frame radiated with overwhelming might, like a tidal wave crashing through everything in its path. The artificial battlefield created specifically for this raiding game shuddered violently. It was designed to contain energy no greater than what an ultimate class devil could handle. So when a Mu class power suddenly exploded into existence, the very foundation of the space began to show cracks. Faint fractures formed across the dimensional walls. If Akira's magic output increased any further, this entire pocket dimension could collapse altogether. His power had already surpassed the limitations of the battlefield, and perhaps even the expectations of the entire underworld. And standing at the center of this storm was Riser Phoenix. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. All he could do was watch, his eyes wide in disbelief as this overwhelming magical aura pressed down on him like a mountain. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Not even his father or elder brother had ever exuded this level of power. What the hell is this guy? On the other side, Akira took a long, slow breath, centering himself. Mu class power, it was far beyond what he had ever imagined. Compared to an ultimate class devil, the difference wasn't just one of magnitude, it was like stepping into an entirely different realm. But more than that. Now that his template inheritance had reached 80%, Akira had gained access to the true name liberation of chains of heaven. In other words, the true power of Enkidu had finally awakened within him. The chains of heaven, a noble phantasm born from the world's restraint force, was an anti-purge weapon. It existed to bind and contain those who strayed beyond reason or logic. In the Fate universe, it was said that when fully unleashed, this weapon could rival even Ea, the Sword of Rupture, wielded by the King of Heroes himself. Slowly, Akira let his magic settle, drawing it back under control as the air grew still. Then, he looked down. Only one opponent remained. Riser Phoenix. Just, what are you? Riser asked, his voice trembling. His entire body was shaking. He had been standing the closest when Akira's magical pressure had been released. He'd felt it firsthand, raw, unfiltered. And now, he understood something with absolute clarity. He didn't stand a chance. This wasn't just fear. This was reality, an undeniable fact looming over him like a sword ready to fall. Riser tried to speak. But before the words could leave his lips, chains of heaven flashed through the air like a silent strike from a wrathful god. Blood sprayed into the air. Arg! The scream tore out of Riser's throat as the divine chains ripped through his body. The immortality trait that was unique to the Phoenix bloodline should have protected him. But it didn't. Not against this weapon. He tried to cry out his surrender, but Akira cut him off coldly. Don't say something boring like "I surrender." The game's only just begun, Riser Phoenix. Akira's eyes gleamed coldly. I remember your arrogance, your pride. You thought you were untouchable. You thought someone like me would bow before your legacy. So why should this end so easily? Riser could no longer speak properly. The pain had crushed whatever strength remained in him. He wasn't a noble anymore. He wasn't even a fighter. He was just a broken puppet lying on the ground, stripped of pride, stripped of hope. And the entire world was watching. From the moment Akira had released that Mu-level aura strong enough to nearly collapse the battlefield itself, every spectator understood something very, very important. This human had been hiding his fangs the entire time. A Mu-class power wasn't just something relevant to devils. It was a tier that stood at the pinnacle of the entire supernatural world. While a handful of transcendents stood even higher, beings so powerful they were considered walking spiritual nuclear bombs, their numbers were rare. And most of those active on the global stage today were Mu-class. Back in the VIP seating, the head of the Phoenix house had gone pale. Lord Surtsks. End this match. My son has lost. He no longer wore that calm, smug expression. His voice was tight, laced with restrained panic. He knew it. Akira had used the Phoenix name as a stepping stone. A stepping stone to rise within the ranks of the Devil Society. And the worst part? He couldn't do a thing about it. Even if he wanted to retaliate, wanted to crush that human into dust, he didn't have the authority. Because sitting right next to him was none other than Surtsk's Lucifer. As the head of a wealthy and influential clan, he could have tried to rally other Mu-class devils against Akira. But now? His son had been thoroughly defeated. Humiliated. Akira had become not only the future fiancé of Rias Gremory but a human who had reached Mu-class strength. Who would dare touch him? Not with Surtsk's Lucifer as his brother-in-law. Lord Phoenix, Surtsk said casually, though his tone carried an unmistakable edge, this match isn't over. But, my son, he hasn't been transported out of the arena. He hasn't taken a fatal injury. He hasn't officially surrendered. According to the rules of the rating game, the match is still ongoing. But surely the Phoenix Patriarch tried to protest. But then Surtsk turned to look at him directly. His gaze was sharp, merciless, like being plunged from summer sunlight into a frozen abyss. The man fell silent. That look was a warning. And a reminder. This was payback. Payback for the countless times he had stubbornly opposed Rias's decision to cancel the arranged marriage despite the many offers and political benefits the Gremory clan had extended. Now, that karma had come full circle. And not even he could beg for mercy on his son's behalf. For just a moment, he remembered the Devil Civil War, the time when Surtsk stood at the forefront of the reformist faction, a battlefield commander whose path was paved in blood. People often mistook him as gentle. But Surtsk's Lucifer hadn't become a Mua because of lineage. He'd claimed that title with unmatched power. And today, he allowed a young human named Shin Akira to teach the House of Phoenix a lesson they would never forget. No mercy. No escape. Chapter 71, Nerva Flame and Riser's Defeat. Chapter 70, Nerva Flame and Riser's Defeat. For the longest time, Surtsk's Lucifer's gentle smile and diplomatic demeanor had lulled many into forgetting a simple truth: he was one of the four great Mo who ruled over the underworld. An existence to be feared, not taken lightly. High above the arena, in the nobility stands, the head of the Phoenix family clenched his jaw so tightly that blood began to pool in his mouth. Hope for his third son, Riser, had long since vanished. In every possible sense, it was over. Down in the center of the artificial battlefield, suspended in midair, Riser Phoenix writhed, his body bound by glowing golden chains, his skin torn and scorched. Yet no matter how many times those divine chains lashed and released him, no matter how deep the wounds carved into his body, golden flames would erupt around him, healing him instantly. The immortality granted by the Phoenix bloodline. A sacred flame that burned away all harm, restoring flesh and bone in mere moments. Under normal circumstances, no physical or magical attack could ever truly injure him. His very existence was akin to an elemental being. His body would dissolve into fire before damage could even register. But not this time. Not against those chains. Chains of heaven now fully unshackled, its final restraints lifted. After reaching 80% template inheritance, Akira had gained access to its true name, Liberation, allowing him to override even the Phoenix's immortal flame. At its core, Enkidu wasn't simply a physical binding tool. It was a conceptual weapon of restraint, born from the world's restraint force itself, an anti-deity armament meant to hold even the divine. Now enhanced, strengthened by Akira's deep resonance with its origin, the chains had grown powerful enough to intervene with reality itself. And so the cycle continued. The chains would strike violently. The flames would heal instantly. Again. And again. A loop of endless pain. Because no fatal damage had been inflicted, the rating game's auto-protection system hadn't activated. And until it did, this torment would never stop. The very power that once made Riser invincible, his regenerative flame, had become the root of his suffering. Because he couldn't die. He could only endure. And Akira made sure of it. He wasn't the forgiving type. Far from it. If there was one word that defined Shin Akira, it was vindictive. Every insult, every mocking word, every arrogant sneer that Riser had hurled at him over the past few weeks. Akira had remembered. Now, he was paying it all back with interest. Even surrender wasn't an option anymore. Chains had sealed Riser's mouth shut, locking his lips behind a silencing enchantment. And in front of the entire supernatural world, watching from magical broadcast devices all across the underworld and beyond, the third son of the noble house of Phoenix was being broken, piece by agonizing piece. Yet it was still within the rules. Painful as it was to watch, no one could claim this was foul play. It was all perfectly legal. This was the underworld, where strength was law and the weak had no right to complain. The rating game, now a televised competition, was born from the brutal duels between devil clans in the aftermath of the Great War. Ajuka Beelzebub had created the system not for sport, but to reduce the pointless bloodshed of a dwindling pure-blood population. The format might have changed, but the underlying principle never had. The strong decide everything. And today, Akira was the strongest. It didn't matter what he did to Riser. No one could stop him. Some high-ranking nobles, those with ties to the Phoenix clan, showed signs of discomfort, their expressions tight with unease. But none of them dared to act. Even the head of the Phoenix house sat frozen, powerless. What could he do, when the highest authority himself, Surtsk's Lucifer, showed no intention of intervening? Time ticked on. Over 40 minutes had passed. Riser no longer knew how many times his body had been pierced, torn, or slammed by those chains. At some point, he'd stopped reacting to the pain, not because he was strong, but because his body had simply grown numb. Agony had become normal. Then suddenly, the fire changed. A new flame burst forth, blindingly bright, far hotter than the golden healing fire he'd used so far. In the blink of an eye, every wound on his body vanished. Even the chains of heaven loosened, slowly detaching from his limbs. A pulse of new energy radiated from Riser's form, faint but undeniable. He had risen. "No way," whispered Katlia, one of the rating game referees, her eyes wide with disbelief. "That's Nerva." It was a hidden ability. A unique trait passed only to pure-blood heirs of the Phoenix line. Nerva, the sacred resurrection flame. It wasn't just a healing power. It was a rebirth. A second life born from the edge of death, awakening the user's latent power, but at a cost. A once-in-a-lifetime ability. A true phoenix down. And once activated, it could never be used again. In the eyes of the Phoenix family, it was their trump card of last resort. The final ace reserved for moments of absolute desperation. To see it triggered in a standard rating game. That was more than just surprising. It was a disaster. Even the game system hadn't deemed Riser in critical danger. But his soul had. That's why Nerva had activated. Enough. Lord Lucifer, my son's Nerva has triggered. This has gone too far, the Phoenix Patriarch shouted, his voice nearly breaking from rage and panic. His fists trembled. His jaw was clenched so tightly it sounded like his teeth might shatter. He knew what this meant. Riser's potential was gone. The Nerva flame consumed a devil's life force and future potential in exchange for this one chance to rise again. A new body. Renewed power. But it burned away everything that could have been. Riser was still young. 20 years old meant nothing to a pure-blood devil whose lifespan could stretch across millennia. But now, that future had been incinerated. That bright flame would only burn faster toward the end. "You're right. This went a bit too far. My apologies, Lord Phoenix," Surtsk finally sighed, his tone gentle but distant. Even he hadn't expected Nerva to activate before the rating game system's safety measures kicked in. It was an unfortunate oversight. While he'd hoped Akira would teach the arrogant Phoenix house a lesson, he never intended to utterly destroy Riser's future. Down in the arena, Akira tilted his head slightly, observing the change. Flames licked Riser's body like a cloak, surging with renewed vigor. He had definitely grown stronger. Still below the level of an ultimate class devil, but now, easily one of the most powerful among the high-class tier. What he didn't know, was that this new strength came at a terrible cost. So you had something like that hidden away all along, Akira muttered, his voice low, calm, but filled with a heavy pressure. I'll admit, that was impressive, Riser. Riser didn't answer. He just stared at Akira. That emerald-haired figure, floating in the air like a silent god of judgment, was no longer just a human. He had become his worst nightmare. 40 minutes of unrelenting torment. Every second seared into his memory. Into his soul. Then I surrender. No hesitation. No pride. The moment he could move again, Riser screamed at the top of his lungs. And in an instant, his body vanished, teleported out of the battlefield by the raiding game's protection system. Riser Phoenix has surrendered. The winner of this raiding game is Rias Gremory. The declaration echoed across the arena like a thunderclap. The battle was over. But what the world witnessed that day would never be forgotten. A human named Shin Akira had carved his name into the annals of Devil Society. And the House of Phoenix had just suffered the most humiliating defeat in the entire history of raiding games. Chapter 72, A Father's Wrath and the Fall of the Phoenix House. Chapter 71, A Father's Wrath and the Fall of the Phoenix House. A gentle voice echoed throughout the arena, calm, composed, and final. This concludes the raiding game. Victory goes to the challenger, Shin Akira. It was Grafia Lucifuge, the cold and elegant maid of the Gremory household, delivering the official verdict. But for anyone who had been watching the brutal match for the past 40 minutes, the result had long since been decided. The curtains had finally closed on this spectacle of domination. And yet, for the entire underworld, the true headline was not the match itself but the human who had seized the spotlight. A lone man had crushed the pride of the Phoenix family and snatched away their bride-to-be, not through politics or schemes, but through sheer, unrelenting force. The moment Akira was teleported out of the arena by the raiding game's exit magic, he was greeted by the sight of countless devils surrounding him. Many among them were high-ranking, their gazes sharp with interest and in some cases, thinly veiled greed. After all, Akira wasn't bound to anyone. He wasn't the servant of any devil. He hadn't signed any slave contract, nor had he been officially added to Rias Gremory's peerage. He was completely unattached. A free agent. But Akira ignored them all. Their gazes meant nothing. They were nothing. Riser-Unisama, are you okay? Came a trembling voice, soft, yet thick with worry. Not far away, Ravel Phoenix knelt beside her brother, supporting his battered body as best she could. Her delicate hands shook as she clutched him, her usually composed face now drained of color. Riser Phoenix was unresponsive. Eyes unfocused. Breathing shallow. The trauma had taken root deep inside him. Meanwhile, the rest of his team, his proud peerage, stood frozen in place, not daring to approach Akira. Fear clung to them like a heavy fog. Each of them had tasted defeat at Akira's hands. Each had seen their king, their symbol of pride, broken down piece by piece in an agonizing, humiliating 40-minute descent into hell. They would never forget it. Akira took a step forward, his voice calm and quiet but cutting like a blade of ice. Be thankful this was just a raiding game. If this had been a real battle, you'd be begging for death long before it ended. He wasn't angry. He wasn't mocking. He was just stating the truth. And that made it even more terrifying. Riser said nothing. But his body began to tremble, violently this time. The words had pierced him deeper than any wound. It was no longer just fear of defeat, it was fear of Akira himself. Something primal. Permanent. That kind of trauma wouldn't fade. And the next time they met, it would all come rushing back. Everyone around them understood that clearly. Even Ravel, who was usually known for her grace and quick wit, remained silent. Her eyes, however, burned with a quiet fury. This was the underworld. Power was everything. The strong stood above all. The weak had no right to resist. Moments later, Rias Gremory stepped forward, her crimson hair swaying with each stride. Her team followed behind her. Akira, that was. She hesitated, her voice faltering. Even she hadn't expected the match to end this violently. She knew how serious Akira could be, but this was on another level. Akira simply shrugged. Nothing much. I just reminded a certain turkey to stay in his coop. Rias blinked, then let out a soft sigh. I see. She knew it was far more than that. What had just happened wasn't just a lesson, it was a declaration. A statement that echoed across the entire underworld. Still, as his official fiancé and the one who had been saved from a forced marriage, Rias chose silence. After all, she had never liked Riser. His arrogance, his entitled behavior, and the pressure he constantly applied to make her submit, it had all built up into a deep, simmering disgust. In a way, watching him fall like this felt satisfying. But that satisfaction didn't last long. A new presence approached. Dark, heavy, and commanding. A tall man in regal attire stepped forward, his every movement radiating nobility and intimidation. The head of House Phoenix. Riser's father. He silently knelt beside his son, placing a hand over his chest and pouring healing magic into his body. But after a moment, the man's face twisted. He had seen it. Riser's magic circuits, once brimming with potential, were now irreparably burned. The source of it was clear. Nerva. That final transformation Riser had used to keep fighting. A forbidden power that devoured future strength in exchange for temporary might. Now, the cost had come due. His son's future had been burned away. No more hope of ascending to ultimate class devil. No more dreams of carrying House Phoenix into a new age. Just ash. The patriarch rose slowly, his eyes locking onto Akira. His expression was cold. Controlled. But behind it, rage and hatred boiled like a roaring inferno. He had lost a son not in body, but in worth. And the one who had destroyed him stood calmly, arrogantly, like it was nothing. Of course. Here's the fully translated and revised chapter in English, with the requested style and tone. You humans, you forced my son to awaken Nerva. I won't forget this. A surge of dark, oppressive demonic magic exploded from the man's body, blanketing the area in suffocating pressure. It was the aura of a peak ultimate class devil, just one step away from reaching the level of a Mu. That single step, however, had blocked his path for years. Still, his power remained a considerable threat among the noble families of the underworld. Rias stepped forward, her expression turning grim. What is this? After your son failed, now you send his father for revenge. But before the tension could escalate further, another overwhelming force descended from the sky. The pressure was far greater. Like a hurricane devouring a breeze, the new presence crushed the Phoenix Patriarch's aura in an instant. Every living being within its range froze, shaken to their core. This was an aura no one could rival. The presence belonged to none other than Surtsk's Lucifer, one of the four great Mu, and the reigning sovereign of the underworld. Within seconds, the oppressive force of the Phoenix had evaporated, smothered by the sheer gravity of Surtsk's presence. Even though the Patriarch had reached the peak of ultimate class and was close to becoming a Mu himself when it came to true power, he stood no chance against Akira. One roasted turkey's done, Akira said coldly, his voice sharp like a blade. Might as well send the old one after him. Chains shimmered into existence behind him. Chains of heaven, countless in number, appeared out of thin air, glowing with a cold, divine light. Each chain honed in on the heart and head of the Phoenix Patriarch, aiming to strike him down without hesitation. If the son had experienced Nerva, then the father should, too. That was Akira's intent. And if the old man lacked the power to resist, then death would simply be the natural outcome. Akira thought so without the slightest doubt. By now, he had ascended to a level comparable to a Mu. He was the wielder of boosted gear, the Longinus class sacred gear, also known as the Red Dragon Emperor's Gauntlet Securitii no Yoru. Combined with Chains of Heaven in its true name release state, he possessed a power that could shake the entire underworld. Taking down someone like the Phoenix Patriarch? Nothing but a formality. But just before the holy chains pierced their target, a violent burst of crimson demonic energy surged in from the side, blasting the chains away and scattering their light across the sky. The shockwave rattled the atmosphere, distorting the air with raw force. It was destruction magic undeniably from the Gremory bloodline, but, on an entirely different scale. Far beyond what Rias could ever produce. Her voice trembled in recognition. Unii-sama. Akira turned, his gaze shifting toward the figure that had just arrived. A man with crimson hair, draped in the regal mantle of a mu, stood calmly amidst the chaos. His presence exuded quiet majesty, and his aura weighed heavily upon the world itself. Surtsk's Lucifer. The supreme ruler of the underworld, the strongest of the four mu and Rias Gremory's older brother. Shin Akira-san, Surtsk said, his voice gentle but firm, why don't we end things here? Akira offered a small smirk. Of course. After all, you're Rias' older brother, which makes you my senior, doesn't it? I'll back off. Thank you. Surtsk nodded slightly, though his piercing gaze never left Akira. He understood clearly. This young man had genuinely intended to kill the head of the Phoenix family. It wasn't an empty threat. It was conviction. The Securitii, the Red Dragon Emperor, had now reached mu-class strength. He wielded Chains of Heaven with full authority, a divine weapon only ever seen in legend. Even Surtsk himself couldn't predict how far this boy's power could go. Historically, even reaching ultimate class with boosted gear was considered a miracle. But mu-class? That was nearly unheard of. Yet here he stood, Shin Akira, a human boy younger than Rias herself, now standing in that exact realm. The Phoenix Patriarch stood frozen in place, his expression pale. He understood now. Akira truly meant to kill him just now. And he'd done it in front of a gathering of high-class devils and noble bloodlines. Without fear. Without hesitation. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized it was simply the reality of this world. Power was everything. And the strong had the privilege of being above reproach. Lord Phoenix, Surtsk spoke again, soft but commanding, I apologize for what happened today. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. I hope you won't take it to heart. Shin Akira didn't mean to offend you. Of course, Lucifer-sama. I understand. What else could he say? Surtsk had made his stance clear. By calling Akira family, he had effectively announced to the entire underworld that this boy now stood under his personal protection. A declaration louder than any threat. And deep in his heart, the Phoenix Patriarch couldn't help but wonder, had this all been planned from the beginning? Had Surtsk approved this raiding game specifically to showcase Akira? Was this whole affair the humiliation of Riser, the forced awakening of Nerva, the public shaming of the Phoenix name, just a stage to debut a new Mutir contender? But of course, his opponent wasn't just any devil. He was Surtsk's Lucifer, a being whose power and influence were inseparably woven into the structure of devil society. And for the Phoenix family, who had stubbornly rejected every peaceful offer from the Gremory household, perhaps this was simply the retribution they deserved. Chapter 73, The raiding game concludes. Chapter 72, The raiding game concludes. The raiding game was over.